What is the dumbest thing you got punished for in school? I was in the 4th grade. Prior to being dropped off at school by my dad, I had discovered an old school Lego spear, you know, the little brown ones, and a rubber band. I had likewise discovered that, if you stretch the rubber band around the length of the spear, and then pull slightly on it, you can make a square shape with the spear propping up 2 of the corners. This is amazing. I thought to myself, I conveniently forgot that, if you pull on the sides of the rubber band too much, that the spear goes flying. So I brought my new square making toy in, to show all of my friends, and they were about as impressed as you all are reading this. We're waiting in line to go to one of our classes, and I'm showing a friend, and lo and behold, the spear flies out of the rubber band and hits our teacher in the glasses. She just stares at me, I stare at her, and she says go to the principal's office. I find out that she claimed that I was attempting to kill her. The principal just laughed while all 3 of us were in her office, and she told me that she had to call my dad, and he had to come in. The principal relayed the story, and now my dad's laughing too. TLDR, my teacher thought I was attempting to kill her with a Lego spear. Mispronouncing the word Niger. There was a group of guys standing around the globe in my 5th grade class, and they were all snickering and pointing at something. Being curious, I walked over to them and asked what was going on. One of them pointed to Niger and said they actually put this on the globe. I didn't understand what they meant. At that point I was 10, and I had never heard the correct pronunciation or the incorrect pronunciation. I was genuinely confused as to why it was funny. Just then, the teacher walks over, having heard the other boy say a very inappropriate word, and pulled us all out into the hall. All 5 of us got slapped with a meeting with the principal. I explained the situation, and, though the principal and teacher very vocally didn't believe me, they decided not to call my parents as a warning. All 4 of those other dudes grew up to be people I faking hate. For other reasons though, not for that. Edit. My explanation for why I hate them now got buried under a downvoted comment. Here it is. One of them grew up, and last I heard, is employed by his daddy in his DJ business, and he is not very good at it. Another dropped off the face of the planet after middle school. Another is a car salesman who does nothing but post about how many girls he's been with, and all his pictures are of him at bars and clubs with his stupid faking slicked back hair. And the other one grew up to be trailer trash. He got a girl pregnant at 17, and his family was conveniently moving away when he found out. He moved states, and the girl didn't bother trying to chase after him. Fine, upstanding gentlemen, the lot of them. Except for that guy that disappeared. I guess I can't hate him for anything outside of what he did in middle school, which was basically be a huge dick to me, so fuck him. It was 2nd grade. My friends and I were playing at recess, and multiple teachers came up to us yelling. We were sent to the office. I'm totally confused by what's going on. We reached the office, and my 3 friends and I were taken into the principal's office one at a time. I was the first to go in, and being a good little boy as I was scared shitless. Because this is the faking principal's office and only horrible kids get sent here. As I walk in, I see this little girl sitting there with who I assume are her parents. The dad instantly is giving me a death stare. The mother is cussing under her breath, looking ready to pounce. And the little girl is crying like crazy. The principal tells me to sit down, and begins to yell at me for doing what I did to this little girl. At this point I'm freaking out, because I have no faking clue why I'm in trouble. According to the little girl who was in kindergarten, me and my friends beat her up and stole her backpack. First off, why would I beat up a little girl? I've never had a record at the school. Second, why the fuck would we want a kindergartner's book bag? Anyway, I was pointed out as the mastermind and was scolded like crazy. I was the one that punched her in the stomach and face while my friends kicked her and stole her backpack. So here I am, a 2nd grader attempting to clear my name and just thinking, what the fuck. This also happened the day before after school, the day I did not even show up because I was sick the day before. So my mother was called in and, of course, was furious. She yelled at me and told me I was going to be grounded for months, but then she heard the story and calmed down. She cleared my name, clarifying the absence, and showed the principal the doctor's note she meant to put in my backpack. So after that I got sent back to my classroom along with my friends and we were greeted by everyone with glares. Everyone hated me for a couple weeks because I beat up a 5-year-old. To this day I'm still faking baffled at what the literal fuck happened that day. I never met that girl in my life, and I got scolded for an hour and hated by the school for something I never faking did. Point TLDR. I'm a 2nd grade evil mastermind who orchestrates assault on kindergartners. Prepare your anus for several tanker trucks loaded with stupid. Point this wound up being longer than I ever intended. TLDR. I brought porn to elementary school and did not cover my tracks at all, and in junior high attempted to open up a black market for Spasiba's recess porn smuggling in elementary school. I was organized. We had the internet in my house, and I was a pervert. I think it was 3rd or 4th grade when I discovered internet porn. Maybe it's because I was a kid or it's because internet porn was in its infancy, dial-up days, but there was nothing really good for free I could find. So I looked at all the premium porn sites homepage, which was a bit of a preview filled with low-res images. This was the only computer my family had, so I couldn't just go there whenever I wanted. Naturally I printed out a large number of these pages, and being unnaturally organized for a child I hole punched them and put them into a duotang for personal use. Of course this folder found its way into my backpack and to school with me. I showed one friend who wanted to show another, and before you know it boys spanning at least 2 grades were all crowded around this duotang I had brought. The girls not getting attention set out to capture whatever it was that had us all in a huge crowd. They somehow managed to get a hold of it, showed it to the recess monitor, and it made its way to the principal. I get called to see the principal, and he's got it sitting on his desk. He says to me, "That's quite the little collection you've made here." And kid me has this grand delusion that I can lie my way out of anything. So naturally I deny it. I pick up the folder and say in my best grown-up voice, "What do we have here?" As I proceed to open it. My goodness, these women seem to have forgotten their pantaloons. This is not mine. I've never seen this before in my life. He then grabs it out of my hands, closes it and taps on my neatly printed name on the front cover. Unnaturally organized. I wouldn't want anyone to take my folder by mistake. Spasiba black market at 7th grade computer class when I discovered how easy it is to pop off keyboard keys. I should have done something clever like switching 2 keys on a few keyboards to screw with people, but subtlety was lost on 7th grade me. Me thought to myself, that kids can't do their work if they are missing a key. I could take a key from each keyboard and sell them back to kids when they so desperately needed it. I knew that if I took all the keys, that the teacher would be wise to my scheme. Plus my backpack only had so many pockets for organizing black market keys, so I decided to pick one key and take that from all the keyboards. As I said, subtlety was lost on 7th grade me, and I decided I'd take the single biggest, most obvious key on the keyboard, the space bar. I carried these around for all of about 2 hours until my class was tracked down, and I was ratted out by someone I thought was a friend I Scott. I was suspended for an afternoon, and was forced to do some community service in the junior high. For calling out a racist bus driver. This new bus driver abolished the assigned seating policy on the bus, so that meant you could sit anywhere. I get on the bus early one day, over 70 kids on this one bus. It gets hard to find a seat, so I could get a seat. The rest of the seats fill up, and in come these 2 black girls. They come to me and say, "Get up, you're in our seat." I tell them no, I was here first, and there's no assigned seats. You guys can't sit down next to me. They say I don't care, get out of our seat. So I told them no again. They go up and tell the bus driver. The bus driver comes over and tells me to get out of the seat. I say no, you said there's no more assigned seating. I was here first, and there's no other seats. They can sit next to me. I won't bother them. He tells me either get out of the seat or get off the bus. So I get up. But by this time, there are no seats. Nobody will scoot over and let me sit down. So I'm standing as the bus driver starts driving. Sure enough, I fall into some people, and everyone's yelling at me and talking shit. So I start cussing everyone out. The other kids, the bus driver, etc. I'm calling the bus driver a racist because he was black and kicked a white kid out of a seat so a couple black girls could have a whole seat to themselves. So he gets mad, stops the bus, and tells me to get off. So I do, and he radios the principal to come get me. I tell the principal what happens, and he completely takes my side. He's asked me where I lived and drove me home. I hated that bus so much. I was the only white kid who wasn't a one-ape gangster in a neighborhood of Spanish thugs. All the other white kids were wiggers, so I got bullied and made fun of relentlessly. I even got punched in the face by some 16-year-old when I was only 12, only because somebody told him I was talking shit, which I wasn't. I didn't even know the dude's name. I came home one day and told my mom that I could never go back there. That was the worst day I ever had in my life. Of course I couldn't find a seat, so I ended up on the very edge of the seat, and the kids in it kept pushing me out and making me hit the floor. Kids kept punching me in the back of the head. Someone dumped a water bottle on me. And the worst part is, I could do nothing about it because I would get jumped by 5 to 8 spics as soon as the bus pulled away. Not racist against Latinos. That's just the only word I can find to describe these horrible kids. I'd turn around to try to stick up for myself, and at least 4 people would go off, sit your ass down. You ain't gonna do shit. We'll fuck you up. Anyways, I went home that day, shaking with rage. I told my mom I could never go back to that school because I would kill everybody at the bus stop. Parents, please, I'm begging you, raise your children to be against bullying. Bullying is what caused Columbine. Bullying causes suicides every day. Every day kids are being pushed closer and closer to the edge just because some little asshole wants to seem cool or tough in front of his friends. All it takes to stop bullying is a voice. If the kids don't stop, go to the school. If the school doesn't make it stop, get the police involved. Bullying destroys so many lives every year. Imagine a dog who was abused by its owners. It's so scared to even look at a human because it remembers what happened the last time. That's what bullying does to kids. They grow up afraid to speak, afraid to interact, afraid to even leave the house. It took me almost a decade to get myself together, to get over the fear and anxiety of social interaction. All it takes to prevent this is to teach your kids to stand up not just for themselves, but for other people. I know I ranted too much, but the first story I typed up brought back years of pain. I grew up in a Midwestern state in a little podunk town. The whole high school was about 300 kids, only 54 in my graduating class. Our school is known for wrestling. We always go to state, and 90% of the time to nationals. It's a huge deal. So it's the day of the state wrestling tournament, and all the wrestlers, basically every guy, are out of school. A lot of their siblings and other relatives are gone to watch. All the cheerleaders and dancers. There's really only like 15% of the students left. Teachers don't teach. They either play movies, give BS worksheets that don't count for a grade, or just play the tournament over the radio. I'm a quiet out girl. I care nothing for wrestling, and I happened to not get enough sleep last night, so I asked my mom if I could stay home this day and sleep. She says sure, and calls the school to tell them I'm not coming in. Now, my mom is a super Christian woman who isn't going to just make up a lie. So when she's asked why I won't be going to school, she just straight up says that it's because it's not a serious school day and I want to rest. The new principal and secretary are furious. They say that's not a good reason. My mom, getting self-righteous, is saying that she's the mom, and any reason that is good enough for her should be good enough for the school. So thanks, mom. Couldn't just say that I was sick or had an appointment. I got in school suspension. It's actually my very best memory from high school. My best friends painted t-shirts and buttons that said free SUNFL00 on them and wore them that day, explaining why I was in trouble. People were printing off free SUNFL00 signs and sliding them under every class door. Kids were running through the halls chanting it. It was like a high school movie. For one day I was popular and everyone was rooting for me. Now I'm 26, in California, and wouldn't trade places with a single one of them, but that memory will always make me feel the warm fuzzies. In grade 2, someone wrote a love note on the project of this beachy girl in the class. who I wouldn't have a crush on in 100 years, but maybe a million. The teacher, appalled at this vandalism, made all of the boys in the class rewrite the note, and she would perform some handwriting analysis to find the culprit. While I was writing, I looked over at another boy's writing and admired his penmanship, particularly his Y, which had a nice loop to it. I decided I would copy his style. You see where this is going. A short time later, the teacher, female, gathered the class around and was ready to announce the culprit. She told the girl whose project was defaced who it was, and it seemed to me most of the other girls in the class as well. Not the boys too, just the girls. Mrs. Teacher asked everyone, one by one, if they would like to know, as the girls snickered. The majority of votes would determine if the culprit would be publicly revealed. The question came to me. I said I did, then changed my mind, thinking I don't want the guilty party to feel the shame of being outed in front of the class. In the end, the vote was no, and only the guilty person would be confronted privately. I was leaving class when the teacher pulled me aside and told me that I was the vandal. Why? Because of the way I did my Y, which I had copied from the other boy. WHHH. But she didn't just do it professionally, no. She made some beach-ass sarcastic comment about it and had the beachy girl whose work was defaced there too, smirking the whole time. Since the girls of the class were told as well, I had to live for the rest of elementary school with them thinking I had a crush on that girl. Okay, story time. I don't know if anyone will still see this late, but here it goes. This is more of a circumventing punishment, but it still is unbelievably stupid. I was in marching band, and we went to the big competition in my area and competed against schools we clearly had no reason to be competing against because we sucked. The reason we sucked was because we had an incompetent drum major and a band director that had the largest Napoleon complex I have ever seen. So we go and do horribly. After our performance, we switch into street clothes and go to the nearest Chili's for dinner before going back and watching the rest of the performances before heading home. At this point, my friends and I already finished our meal and wanted to walk around the shopping center. We went to the band director and said we would be in the shops around the shopping center. He said, "Cool, just be back for the bus." My friend asked another person what time we were rolling out. They said about 2 hours from when we asked. We walk over to the shops and end up in a Books A Million. We are having a great time and laughing and joking when my friend gets a call from the girl he had just asked, asking us where we were. We told her, and she said the bus was leaving right now and we had to get there immediately. We race across the shopping center and get back to the bus, where we were chastised by the band director for going too far away and not letting him know. My friend spoke up and told him we did. He didn't listen. He then said that when we got back we would have to write a report about all the bands we saw and their techniques and turn it into him for a grade. At this point I was livid. Now, I'm normally a non-confrontational person, but I couldn't hold my tongue, so I raised my hand. He acknowledged me, and I said, "I'm not in your concert band class. How are you going to grade me on it, or make me do it?" He just responded with, "Oh, I'll make you do it." Didn't do the paper, never got in trouble. Still thought it was the dumbest thing ever. TLDR, pretentious dick band director tried to force me to do an assignment for a class I wasn't in. Decided not to do it and nothing happened. During my elementary school years, I went to something called RKK. It was a before and after school program for kids with full-time working parents that had to leave early in the morning and couldn't pick up their kids until late in the afternoon. One day during RKK, we were all out on the playground like normal. I can't remember the specific context of the situation, but I was just running around with a couple of my friends, playing tag I believe. At one point, I ran underneath a picnic table and another one of my friends ran after me. Jokingly, I pretended my hands were guns and started shooting at him to try and ward him away. Couldn't be more innocent. Well, lo and behold, one of the RKK supervisors caught me doing it and absolutely flipped sheet. Yelled at me to get out from underneath the table, suspended me from playing the rest of the time outside, which basically meant I had to sit down at the table next to her stubborn ass for 30 minutes, and called my parents in early to pick me up. The worst part of it was they filed a behavior report because of the incident, which would have resulted in me getting kicked out of RKK, which would have been a huge hindrance on my parents. I don't remember the immediate aftermath, but my dad and I still joke about it to this day, as he is the one that came to pick me up that day. He also tells me he just ragged on the supervisors for punishing me for such a trite and stupid thing, as well as writing a strongly worded email to my school district's superintendent. TLDR, I made finger guns and almost got suspended from my before and after school child care program. I'm deaf, but mainstreamed my entire life thanks to cochlear implants. I went to good schools, so I didn't have too much trouble. But we are still talking about the American public education system here. 3rd grade. Got my tray of food. Almost trip on accident on some stupid table's leg. Some conflies. You better believe I got lunch detention for the next 3 days. 4th grade. Lunchrooms being rowdy, I guess. They're dismissing tables one at a time. I understand nothing because cochlear implants are utter crap at understanding microphoned voices. As far as I know, lunch is over and we are leaving. I get up to throw away my food, but then suddenly a swarm of lunchroom monitors surround me and yell at me for disobeying. I'm sitting on stairs to the stage in the cafeteria waiting to be escorted to detention instead of recess, but I decide to cry. Big tears. The principal comes over and recognizes me as the token deaf kid in the school, sends me back to class. I seriously hated all of the lunch monitors senior year in high school. Chilling in math class, there's no teacher. Sub walks in, does the sub talk, notices some newfangled tech on my ear, and somehow deduces that it's one of those blue teeth things. Yells at me and gives me an ultimatum, take it off or go to the principal. Funny thing was that a couple of years ago we had adopted a BIT policy, bring your own device, that said that cell phones, handheld game systems, and laptops, and whatever else, were perfectly okay, as long as they didn't interfere with classroom happenings. In other words, had I been wearing a Bluetooth headset, it would have been fine according to the school. Anyway, with that ultimatum given to me, I just had to look around the classroom. Who knew my deal? Half of the people were dying in their seats, but the sub assumed they were laughing at me getting caught, I guess. I went to the principal. He personally came back with me and talked to the sub in the hallway. She minded her own business after that. I have a common name, but I go by a nickname. In elementary school latchkey, after school program, they did that thing where everyone has to be quiet and one kid writes down anyone who talks, and that kid doesn't get to go outside, but instead has to stay and write some stupid sheet over and over for like 2 hours. Well, there was another girl with my name who went by our real name, and she was a loudmouth. Like everyone knew it. Of course she talks the whole time, gets written down, but then when outside time comes the teacher tells me that I have to stay inside. I protest, of course, and remind them that no one calls me by my real name. Each teacher refuses to acknowledge that she made a mistake and I have to stay inside. To add insult to injury, that girl who actually talked the whole time starts laughing and mocking me in front of the teacher, and I still am the one who gets punished. What the actual fuck? Also in high school I got chided because when I put my backpack on it caught my shirt and I accidentally showed like 2 inches of my side. The teacher told me that I needed to be more aware of how I moved or some shit because I would cause a distraction. Dude, if seeing a sliver of some 15-year-old girl's torso is a distraction, then maybe you're the one with the problem. Also once I almost got arrested for joking around with my friend that my Pokemon keychain was going to kill her because she kept saying it freaked her out. She literally told the school police officer that I threatened to murder her, and they initiated an investigation and interviewed like every person I had classes with and kept me locked in an empty room the whole day. Then they had cops show up and told me they were going to arrest me, then locked me back in the room a while, then sent me home when school got out and called my mom at work. She was furious. She stormed up there and I went from possible arrest to 10 days out of school suspension to 2 days in school suspension. But the damage was already done. The whole school and all my teachers knew about the incident and I got treated really poorly the rest of the year. I was an honor roll student, and I got treated like one of the druggy fuck ups the rest of the year. That dumb girl even gave me a Christmas card with something like "no hard feelings. I hope we can still be friends" written in it. Unfaking believable. Somebody in one of the programming classes hacked through the firewall and had it set up so that it was not from their login, but some random one. Welp, apparently, that random was me. Side note, our shop teacher ended up becoming assistant principal this year. I dropped his class, and it apparently pissed him off. He approached me and told me I was being suspended for hacking out of the blue. I got pretty pissed, knowing I hadn't done anything, and asked him where he got this info. The library staff were also the school's IT people, so we went to the library and I demanded to know everything about these supposed hacks I'd done. The IT lady took about 20 minutes before she said they were coming from the programming room, a room I'd never been in and had no classes in. I was off the hook, but won't ever forgive that guy because he made a huge scene about taking me out of lunch and down to the office, etc. For real, though, there are so many worse things kids could be doing than going on MySpace at school. That's what these hackers were doing, MySpace. Just faking. Let them point at it. I didn't end up getting suspended. This all happened within an hour or so. Almost got expelled in junior high for selling candy at school. Well, a fuck ton of candy, like I was the candy faking kingpin. It started in 7th grade. Me and my friends would go to this local candy manufacturer on the way home from school. They made things like foaming gum, sandy candy, some slimy sour stuff etc. We would go into their office and buy candy in bulk at wholesale pricing and split it. I took some to school at some point and gave some out, and the kids went apeshit. Then it hit me, I could buy it and wrestle here at school for double. I took a $20 loan out from my late grandfather, RIP, and doubled up in 2 days, paid him back, and did it over and over again. By the time I got caught I had kids buying tubs of this shit. Needless to say they were hooked. I eventually was caught in my usual spot where all the kids knew to find me. In the back of this hallway that led to one of the gym entrances. No one was ever back there on lunches and breaks. At this point business was booming. In my black Gen Sport I had the big pocket filled to the brim with candy, and in the front pocket, just cash. I was up to over $1,200 at this point. I've got a line of kids all the way down the hall, and that was my downfall. That fateful day I saw my science teacher from the year before, Mrs. Tanaki, come around the corner. She rushes down the hall past the line of excited prepubescents yelling already, "What are you doing down here?" and rips my Jan Sport open, and out falls more candy than would fit in Mary Poppins' bottomless faking bag. Now, Mrs. Tanaki being the one to find me was a twist of fate. See, the previous year she made me retake her final because I got 110% on the test. That's right, every question right, even the bonus questions, and she made me retake the test because she thought I cheated. In her defense I was a C student at best, but only because I never did my homework. She had me retake the test and I aced it as well, minus one question, so she owed me. She grabbed my bag. Kids were trying to dive at the fallen candy as she yelled at them to go back outside. It was as if they knew more than I the fate of my small business. Mrs. Tanaki had me pick all the candy and put it back in the bag as she held it with a confused and angry face. Again, this stuff didn't look like normal candy and had minimal labeling. I'm pretty sure she thought they were drugs. Mrs. Tanaki walked me to her classroom and asked me what I was doing. I explained the situation and I could tell she was impressed and amused by me, the candy kingpin, but kept a serious face on. She told me that this was an expellable offense, but cut me a deal. If I joined the Science Olympiad League, basically a competition against other schools on who can give some popsicle sticks, a straw and a rubber band into a goddamn bridge that holds the most weight, for example, and she would let me keep the cash and not report the incident. I accepted the deal. Our team went on to win 2nd place in our region and I used the money to buy a pair of Burberry Air Force Ones and a CD burner to start my next business. A lot of you are probably wondering about the candy. Mrs. Tanaki did confiscate the candy, but wound up using it as giveaways in her classes, so I was cool with it. Late, but nice to get off my chest. 8th grade was a miserable experience for a multitude of reasons, the largest being that, even though it was a smallish school, each grade was divided into 2 teams, and within my team we stayed with the same class of kids all day except for lunch. I had the misfortune of having 0 friends in my class, but a handful of guys who liked to make my day less than pleasant. We didn't get a regular recess, but we would get incentive times every few weeks. I especially loved this, because it was a rare opportunity to have fun with my friends besides lunch or outside school. It was also a time when teachers would let students get caught up on missing work. I was always a good student and did my work, but one incentive day I was kept in class by my language arts teacher for a missing assignment. I had, for a fact, turned it in when it was originally due, and I told her this, but she'd misplaced it, so she made me stay in to work on it. As I'm nearing being finished with it, she finds the missing paper and dismisses me to the gym where everyone was. I literally walked in the door as they blew the whistle to send everyone back to class. Edit. Ugh. And this was the same teacher who I asked in private if she could move me to the front of the room because I was being picked on by the guys in the back where I'd been assigned. She says sure, and the next day announces to the class that I'd asked to be moved, which of course just made things worse. She wasn't doing this stuff to be mean. I think she was just that elated, but to this day it still infuriates me. In middle school I had a pretty ridiculous thing happen to me. It was right after our grade had watched the sexual harassment videos, and I shit you not, the school counselor had even said, while showing them every year we get girls coming to us after these video making claims that they've been sexually harassed, and it turns out to be nothing. Flash forward to a few days later, and I'm being called to the counselor's office. I get in there, and she is red-faced and pissed. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And before I can even sit down she starts ripping into me about the seriousness of sexual harassment and how if she finds out what so and so said about me is true, that she's calling the cops and letting them take me to jail. Young me is scared as fuck and freaking out. One of the worst days ever of my school experience. Later that day my grandma picked me up, and while in the car she could tell something was wrong. She asked and I told her what had happened. Grandma, don't faking play. I told her the story and cried while doing so because I was so upset about the matter. Shit you not, she does a U-turn in the street and heads back to the school where she just so happens to be the lunch lady and busts up in that bish with the fury of infinite grannies. The counselor didn't know what hit her. She hadn't realized who she was dealing with and immediately apologized for everything. The next day I come to school and get called to her office again, and this time the girl that accused me is in there. Up till now I had no idea who it was. Here she is crying in the same chair I'd cried in just a day before from being accused of sexually harassing her. She's forced to apologize after having been hounded and admitting that she'd made it up after seeing the video. Just like the counselor said, she had the locker next to mine and she was a plus size girl. I had accidentally bumped into her overhang a few times while trying to get to my locker and apparently it pissed her off to the point of claiming I sexually harassed her. I suppose I was never actually punished for it, though I mean I did go through some traumatic mental punishment in the little time I was freaking shit that I was going to go to jail for something I didn't even realize I'd done. Point pretty dumb, if you ask me though. I didn't really get in trouble, but I was almost put in foster care because my principal was nuts. 3rd grade, I brought cupcakes for my class for my day. Why? I was a generous little thing. We had to sit along the walls in the hallway, Indian style, before class started in the morning with our stuff in front of us. My mom brought in 2 big Tupperware containers of cupcakes, all nice and pink and yummy. I helped make them and tried to find a place to put them. She moved my lunch bag and put it next to me against my leg and pushed it back against the wall with her foot. Well, the principal, a tall, twitchy lady, about 3 whole blocks down, sees my mom push her foot near my leg. She calls the police. I get called in from the cupcake party to the office where there's a CPS agent, the school nurse, and 2 cops. I, being only HMM7, feel safe because I was taught that cops are people you can trust. The nurse was awesome and the CPS lady just looked nice. We had a nice little chat about how often does your mother abuse you? Why does your father sexually abuse you? Show me on the doll where they inserted X, and of course I was just denying everything because I wasn't abused lol. My mom came in with a lawyer and all hell broke loose, and the CPS lady took me to her car and I got to watch some kids show. While I'm pretty sure my mom got tased 2 years later, the principal was in prison for heroin use. In a way I was punished. I didn't get a single cupcake. And I switched schools. TLDR. Crazy heroin addict principal calls CPS on my mom. Ruins cupcakes at school. It was during 6th grade PE. 6th grade is a unique time because on average boys tend to be smaller than girls, yet everyone still has that elementary school energy point. We were playing some sort of frisbee game that involved 2 groups of students throwing a frisbee back and forth and seeing who could get it. It was a bit like a team version of Fires Up, if anyone knows what that means. One of the times the frisbee was thrown, I was going to catch it when one of the bigger girls, let's call her Maddie, pushes me to the ground and grabs the frisbee out of the air. Now I have a very distinct memory of not being angry but instead thinking, okay, next time it comes I got to be stronger. I have to expect someone is coming. A few throws later, a frisbee is going towards her, and I leap to grab it. I end up missing the frisbee and just knocking both Maddie and I to the ground. Neither of us said anything, and I thought it wasn't a big deal. Point at the end of the PE class, the teacher is talking to Maddie and then calls me over. The teacher demands that I apologize to Maddie for attacking her. I thought this was stupid, so I said something like, "For what?" and then I start laughing. Probably a mistake. I then get sent down to the principal's office, which immediately escalated everything 100-fold because Maddie's mother happened to be the vice principal in charge of discipline. Unfortunately I didn't learn this IRO after talking to her mother. I see Maddie walk out of the office with this smile on her face that screamed, "Don't mess with me BTCH." When it was my turn in the office, I learned that I had not just pushed both of us down but purposefully tripped Maddie and started stomping on her body in a vengeful rage. Apparently there were very serious bruises all over Maddie's body, and I was in very serious trouble. According to Maddie's mother, I was lucky that I wasn't sent to juvie and should be thankful that I was only suspended for 3 days. I have spent the last decade having to explain to anyone who asks if I have ever had any disciplinary issues. It's now on my permanent record. I'm late, but I created an account just for this question. I once got sent to the principal for giving a kid without lunch a bag of Goldfish. I was at one end of out juvie style long lunch tables, and he was at the other. Word got to me that he forgot his lunch. I had a snack pack of Goldfish I didn't want. When I tried to pass it down to him, the other kids tried to steal it. So I leaned back and lightly tossed it to him behind the other kids, and he caught it. In 2 seconds the monitor, also the principal, came over and told me to go stand outside her office. I was in 8th grade and had literally never gotten in trouble throughout my entire 9 years of school, one of those K-8 Catholic schools. My first offense, and I was sent to the principal. How the principal worked is you were sent to your doom, but first you wait outside her office on the wall. The wall was, as you'd expect, a long wall next to the office door in the main hallway of the school. So I went and stood, only to have every teacher I've ever had walk by and freak out, because I had never done anything wrong. They all stopped, stared, asked what the hell was going on. The once lunch was over, all the students in all the grades walked single file out of the lunchroom, past this wall. All my friends, classmates, kids I babysat, my younger brother, who cried when he saw me there, he was 6, and his friends had to walk past me. Everyone stared. I was on display and humiliation was only the first part of the punishment. My 12-year-old self couldn't handle it, and as soon as they were all gone I cried. Principal stood by her statement that I made a scene in the lunchroom by throwing food, even when every kid at my lunch table came to my defense. TLDR, got sent to the principals for feeding the hungry in a Catholic school. 2 things come to mind. Rolling up my shirt sleeves. We had no dress code that didn't stipulate it couldn't happen. The entire class was wearing a mix of long/short sleeved. I was hot, so I rolled up my sleeves. Teacher told me to roll them down. I asked why, as I was hot. She told me to roll them down, because she said so. I kept them rolled up. I was kicked out the class, and given detention too. Falling out with a girl. I fell out with a girl because she didn't sleep round my house. We were 13 over 14 as she decided it would be a good idea to give a blowy to some boy. I was annoyed she ditched me for a boy and stopped speaking to her. The boy she managed to get with, well, he was the boyfriend of a girl in the year above. This girl had been expelled previously because she'd stood on a table and kicked the deputy head teacher in the face. On the Tuesday, this girl came into our school, picked up a discarded hockey stick, and went to find my former friend, and proceeded to beat her black and blue. Point: I had nothing to do with this. I hadn't asked the girl to come in, or even told her about it. I'd never even spoken 2 words to her, but because my former friend and I had fallen out for the same reason as her getting beaten up, I was guilty by association and the school thought I'd asked her to come in. Some of the teachers believed me, thankfully, and so my punishment wasn't too severe. Not that I deserved one anyway. I was kicked off the upcoming school trip and that was it. My mum on the other hand sided with the teachers that believed I'd asked the girl to come in. She came into school to collect me, grabbed me by the hair and hit me round the head, and dragged me out of school. She didn't believe me for years what the real story was, and I'm still hurt over the fact that she believed other people instead of listening to my version of events. It'll shape the way I listen to my kids' edit. The second point, when I'm writing, has a 2, but its published form is showing as a second 1. I was a huge fan of the Captain Underpants book series when I was in grade 5. Anyone who read those books will probably remember that there was a running joke that whatever monster was attacking the school in a given installment would eat the gym teacher. Those who read these awesome books will also probably remember that there were also Captain Underpants activity books which included Mad Libs type stories, where you got to insert details about yourself and your school into a Captain Underpants story. I went to a Canadian elementary school that didn't have designated gym teacher, so naturally where the book said to fill in the name of my gym teacher I just put down the name of my regular teacher. This teacher was actually a sub in her first year of teaching who got thrust into what basically amounted a full-time teacher role when our more experienced teacher had some kind of surgery. Even at 9 years old I could tell that this teacher wasn't ready to be solely responsible for a class full of kids. She was constantly stressed out and on edge and made it our problem point, so while my friends and I were giggling together as I showed them my starring role in this Captain Underpants story, she came over and grabbed the book from my hands to see what the fuss was about. When she saw her own cameo and her fate in the story, she flipped the fuck out, kicked me out of class for the day, and called my parents to tell them I was writing threats about her in my books. My mom just told her to stop wasting her time with silly bullshit like this. It would not be the last time she wasted mine and my parents' time with silly bullshit like this. Yes, Mr. Was. I was totally seriously planning violence against you via toilet themed monsters. Edit. I believe Captain Underpants was banned from the classroom after this incident as well, which is a shame because those books are literary masterpieces. Long but very fun story time. This is without exaggeration. Just ask anyone who went to North Gwinnett High School 09213. I had 5 FBI forensics called in, 14 school hard drives taken by them, all computers I had used that year, had to give up my home computer to the forensics, added a cybercrime clause added to my school's rules, would have been expelled if it wasn't for this not existing, which they were very eager to inform me of, which was promptly labeled the my name clause. Got asked by the 2 heads of the disciplinary committee, what level of a hacker are you? And when I laughed it off and informed them there was no such thing, they both yelled that's bull, as if they'd rehearsed it. I received 14 days of suspension after the forensics told them to cool their sheet. Initial suspension was 6 days, got 8 more for trying to turn in my computing assignment and drawing a smiley face on someone's computer. So how did it happen? Well, I was building a website for the girls' track team, as they were getting famous at the time, so the coach gives my friend a CD with all of the members of the track team, as he happened to find him first. He hands me the unlabeled CD in class, and informs me it's state secrets for fun. I giggled and assumed it was the cracked Windows CD I had lent him. Well, someone who heard the initial exchange stole it from my backpack at some point, probably wanting to see the secrets. But here's where things get twisted. The kid sees the girls on the CD, starts the rumor that I had been photographing the girls in secret. The rumor quickly evolves to I was taking pictures of the girls in the locker room, which evolved to I hacked the school's cameras in the girls' locker room. Little questioned why there was a security camera there, and fewer knew that it was closed circuit. Well, a teacher overheard this, so the administration jumped on this and started investigating my classmates without me knowing. Now this wasn't the first time rumors had evolved for me, and I was already famous for hacking my grades, stealing government secrets, etc. So administration does the most natural thing they can think of, call the FBI. I get pulled out of health class like a fugitive. This also started many fun rumors, and sat down in front of all the administration and the forensics in one room. Now at this point, I had a flash drive backup on my school account with several programs, most notably, Cain and Abel, a packet sniffing program that had the forensics terrified of. I had never used it at school, naturally, so I was able to explain that, which they accepted, but Siegfried, the head of the disciplinary, would not. He asked me what level of a hacker I was amongst several other moronic questions before the forensics told him to shut up. Siegfried wanted me expelled, but I informed him I did nothing against the rules. Next semester, clause I was instated, and during my time away, the rumor mill made me out to be a faking hero, which is to this day, is something I don't understand. TLDR, the first paragraph is my TLDR, at least read the first sentence. TLDR, I got bullied, everyone ignored it. There are a few depressing experiences that I'll answer ops questions. So up until I was nearly 15 I was the shortest kid in my year. Then I started growing and ended up 6 feet 2. Anyway, when I was about 11 or 12 I got bullied pretty badly. I did karate, so one-on-one I could, and did fuck a few of the people involved up. But as it happened I was usually bullied in a group. One day I got held down and they stole my pants. I nearly got suspended for indecency when I went to the office to try and get some more pants to wear. But the woodwork teacher, probably the only sane teacher I had that year, lost his sheet at the VP and my teacher, when he heard about it. Another time there was this chair that had sides to it, but was still hollow underneath it. Since I was small the group wondered if I could fit under it. Me not being very smart crawled under it. They then proceeded to jump on and kick the chair while I was under it. A teacher, not my actual teacher, but I think he was friends with my teacher, then walked into the classroom. I remember seeing his feet in the doorway and he just stood there for like 5 to 10 seconds before he yelled at everyone to get outside. And since the chair was pretty heavy, when everyone stopped jumping on it and kicking it, I was struggling to get out from underneath it. Teacher then gives me 2 days worth of detention for whatever bullshit reason, and the other kids get off scot-free. Pretty sure my actual teacher, who was very Christian, hated me because he did nothing except make the bullying worse. I remember he kept me back after school a couple of times, and I told him how much I hated everyone involved, how I badly and brutally I wanted to hurt them. And instead of actually trying to help, he faking calls the devil and informs the VPs, by his own diagnosis, that I'm a psychopath that is a danger to my fellow students, instead of a relatively normal kid that had been pushed to the edge. Anyway, I got put in with the kids with disabilities and got to walk some crazy ladies' golden retrievers with them, plus her, instead of being in class with everyone I hated. So that was pretty cool. And I got to meet a former All Black one day because of it as well, which was also very cool. Why I got a little bit angry and sidetracked writing this. So sorry for the rant, I guess. I've told this story before, but this is a good one. But I apologize for the wall of text. On my 3rd day of 6th grade, in first period math, I had forgotten my calculator. I casually asked the kid next to me if I could borrow his, which he said I could. 10 minutes later I'm working diligently, and the boy asks for his calculator back. I politely tell him I'm finishing my last problem, and that I'll return it as soon as I'm done. He freaks out, demanding his calculator back immediately, but I'm just trying to finish my work, which he already had done, so I could get a good grade. Instead of just asking for his calculator back politely though, he decides the only logical course of action is to take my pencil, not his, and plunge it an inch deep into my arm. At this point I'm stunned. I have no idea what the hell just happened, so I'm just staring at my arm dumbfounded. Eventually I pull the pencil out of my arm, which immediately starts pouring blood, and just head over to my teacher and casually ask to go to the nurse, still not really sure what had just gone down. My teacher starts screaming and runs me down to the nurseware, and you can see the quality of middle school nurses here. I was forced to clean and dress my own wound. Afterwards I left and continued my day, but not surprisingly, during my lunch period I was called to the principal's office to describe the events that transpired prior to my being shanked. Little did I know, at the same time, the perpetrator was giving his side of the story in a different room. To make a long story short, he accused me of stealing his calculator and poking me with a pencil as a response to my thievery. Bullshit, right? Apparently not, because administration decided to believe him, the one who stabbed another student, rather than the child with a hole in his arm. So as a result, I got a detention for stealing a calculator, and the little sheet that shanked me got off clean. So thanks US education system for your impeccable disciplinary system, and for the permanent scar on my arm. Eating in classrooms wasn't allowed in school, but I had a quarter of a sandwich to finish as well as an essay, so I had a half-eaten, wrapped corner of a sandwich beside me while working on my laptop. Private school, and a teacher told me that I should 1 get out of the classroom and 2 not eat. Fair enough. I unwrapped my sandwich, took a last bite, and threw it in the bin. This woman totally blows up at me. She said that I'd done it just to be disrespectful, that I was sassing her, and that I was being super rude. Continuing on, I apologized and it changed zero, so when I went to leave I said I have to get my laptop bag and charger from my locker, which was directly behind me. Apparently this was sassing her too, despite the fact that we weren't allowed to carry our laptops, rented from the school, without our bags. I got sent to the office, and was subsequently suspended, after arguing that what she said was ridiculous, and that she was way over exaggerating what had happened. My head of house seemed to agree, but she couldn't do much, since you have to take a teacher's word. I also got in trouble for using boxed hair dye. We weren't allowed to have obviously unnatural colors in our hair, so I went and got this nice, dark brown auburn, put it in my hair, and it came out a bright red. My hairdresser said that they didn't want to dye over it for a week, so I came to school with a note. They said that I couldn't come back until it was fixed. The suspension lasted half a day until my mother blasted them, and I brought in the box as proof of what the color was meant to come out as private school. Spent almost a whole day with a friend on the verge of suspension in 8th grade. In band class we had a back storage room that spanned the whole back of the room, so it was fairly large. There was a hole in the wall, it didn't go all the way through, and someone stuck the seat of a throne in it, and they would jump off a chair into the seat. This was such a stupid thing, it had no value whatsoever. Well, as the big bad 8th graders, we felt compelled to have some authority there, and we yelled at this one kid that was basically the ringleader of this bullshit game. My friend grabbed him between the shoulders and said some shit, but that's all. He was fine all through band class, which was the first class of the day. When we tried to tell the teacher, she didn't care. Like, okay, fuck you beach, you're welcome. Fast forward into 2nd or 3rd class, and I'm called to the office with my friend. Basically, this little asshole jumpy kid lied about us beating him up. The black, racist, sexist history teacher even said he was crying in his class about it. My friend and I were confused, because first, we didn't do anything, and second, he was fine an hour ago, kept going to class, and being called back throughout the day, even spending most of my lunch hour in there for such a simple thing. Eventually they realized the situation and we were let go. The worst part is he wasn't reprimanded for not only lying, but also vandalism, and they never even contacted my parents during the whole process of me almost getting suspended. TLDR. Kid lied about friend and I bearing him up. Spent almost entire day in principal office dealing with it. Not tucking in my blouse. There wasn't any rule against not tucking your blouse in, so I didn't. Then this new teacher saw me and flipped his sheet. Said I was being inappropriate, like in a sexual way. Got sent to the principal, and she didn't listen to the reason, just told me to tuck in my blouse. I said no, and told her what happened. New teacher was very angry at me, so I said that I was sorry because he couldn't keep his dick under control. Principal laughed and I didn't get any detention points sent to the principal because I was accused of stealing my seatmate's money. Turns out the faking idiot had placed her money between the pages of her math notebook. Refusing to dance during a Christmas party. I had just gotten my appendix removed, so I couldn't just move suddenly and cheat like that. Teacher was so angry with me for being so antisocial. I said that I couldn't because of my faking surgery and she went silent. One of my classmates said oh he got detention instead. Got scolded for not running fast during PE. It was very hot outside, so I just did a jog. Teacher saw me and scolded me and ordered me to run faster. I said, I will if you get here and run too, you fat ass. Got detention along with 11 of my classmates who laughed. No regrets edit. Remembered another 1-5. Laughing at the principal during morning assembly. It was a week before exams and the principal was encouraging us with her speech. Then she said we are all pessimistic. I think she meant optimistic. I don't know why, but I found it hilarious, so I lolled so hard I had to hold one of my friends for support because I was laughing so hard and it was very quiet that morning, so the whole school heard me. Teachers got angry at me and scolded and me told me that I was a very rude kid and that I had no respect blah 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 and they threatened me with detention and a month of community service. The principal realized her mistake soon after and started laughing too. I didn't get punished though. The teachers really hated me. I made a hit list in high school. First off, it wasn't serious at all. JFK and Lincoln were both on there and had been crossed out as if I'd successfully assassinated them. Some friends and a couple of celebs were on there to add some bulk and humor with a shopping list for napalm, crack, milk, and cat socks on the side of the main list. All of this was scrawled on the paper very angrily and looked pretty stupid, but my dumb high school mind thought it was funny. Another kid in my class saw this list and asked if he could check it out. I let him and then got back to doing actual classwork. A few moments go by and I realized this kid had disappeared with my list. Just as I had decided to take a bathroom pass to look for him, the school security guard shows up and asks for me by name. We make our way down to the principal's office and I slowly realize that the situation may be related to my dumbers list. The moment I stepped into the office the principal started laying into me for the moron I was. He asked if I had been paying attention to the news lately, which made me think he was talking about 9/11 as it had happened like 2 weeks prior. He clarified that he meant Columbine, to which I replied that Columbine had happened forever ago, like an idiot. He also asked me why I wore all black all the time as I had been wearing a black shirt and jeans that day. I never wore all black that often, but they were pretty aggressive about it. So he expelled the hell out of me and got the cops to come to my house and search my room. They saw that I was a pretty normal teenager, aside from being incredibly stupid, and left me alone after they found nothing. Hands down the stupidest thing I had ever been in trouble for. Ever. In first grade, I had a teacher who was a total nightmare. Every group of students that have ever graduated her class have hated her. One day in class she told us to bring 2 number 2 pencils, the standard yellow pencils with the pink eraser on top. The next day, I, being an awkward introverted psychologically fragile little kid that was scared to death of her, and decided to bring in 3 number 3 pencils, just in case I lost one, or just in case another student needed one. Surely the teacher would be proud of me for being prepared, and for having an extra pencil, right? Nope. The next day, I came into class and sat at my desk, confident that today the teacher was going to praise me. When everyone was seated, she asked all the students to take out their 2 number 2 pencils and place them on the desk. She walked down the aisles to make sure that everyone had their pencils. When she got to my desk she stopped and looked down at my pencils. I had 3. She asked me, "What did I ask you to bring in?" I replied, 2 number 2 pencils, smiling at her and proud of what I had done. She then asked me, "What did you bring in?" I replied, 3 number 2 pencils. I brought one extra just in case. But she didn't let me finish or explain why I had an extra one. Immediately she went into psycho mode, leaned down and stared in my face, hyperventilating like a raged bull. I started having a panic attack. My mind was racing. I had no idea what I did wrong. I was just a first grader. She grabbed all 3 of my pencils, held them in front of my face, and snapped all 3 of them in half, and then threw them across the room, while shouting at me. She then grabbed me by the collar of my school uniform and literally lifted me up off the ground, and threw me in to coat closet, where I was punished for the entire class. I do remember, when she finally let me out, that I had pissed myself out of fear and she laughed and made fun of me. This happened over 30 years ago, and I'm certain it was one of the instances in my childhood that led to my social anxiety disorder. I still have panic attacks every once in a while, and even to this day, I remember the scent of her perfume, and when I happen to smell that same scent, I'm immediately sick to my stomach point. So the dumbest thing I ever got punished for in school was bringing in 3 pencils when I was told to bring in 2. Mooning the cafeteria. Let me explain. I was 5 years old in kindergarten and we were eating our lunch one day just like any other. I wore gym shorts to school at that age because I didn't really have much say in the matter, and that's what my mom bought me to wear. So anyways, we're eating lunch and my stomach expands more than usual. Probably not, but my waistband got uncomfortable and that's what my tiny brain told me. Not wanting to be uncomfortable, I slid my thumb under the waistband, hooking the shorts as well as my underwear, and quickly pull it out, and let it sort of snap back into place. I remember one of the girls in my class laughing at me after that, but I didn't think anything of it. Apparently one of the teachers monitoring lunch saw the interaction, because after lunch, when we lined up in the hallway to go back to class, my teacher flipped her sheet. See, our class teachers didn't watch us during lunch, they did their own thing. The ones that did monitor us left a note for them each day that had either a smiley face, a straight face, vertical bar, or a frowny face. I think most of the time our class got smiley faces. Well, that day, it was a frowny face that said something of the lines of how I had mooned the cafeteria. So my teacher tells the class to go back to our room and pulls me out of line. She yells at me for a while and I just remember having no idea what the hell was going on. Then she paddles me and I pull my eyes out, not so much because it hurt, but because I was a big teacher's pet / brown noser and I didn't know what I had done to upset her. After that I got sent to the principal's office and he called in the lunch monitor. That resulted in 5-year-old me arguing with this middle-aged woman for a good 5 minutes. I don't know how much my brain has embellished the story, but from what I remember, she was describing the scene like I jumped up on one of the tables and dropped trow for all to see. So of course the principal believes her and says he's going to paddle me. I say I already got paddled and he thinks I came straight from lunch and I'm just trying to get out of a punishment. Side note, that principal was a complete dick to all the kids and we hated him, and he ended up getting fired 2 years later because he sexually harassed the school superintendent. So anyways, here I get paddled for a second time, and this time I don't cry because I'm pretty pissed. So he decides to call my mom in from work. When she gets there, she's pissed of course, because she had to take off of work and she's ready to take it out on me. Fortunately for me, I used to be a terrible liar, at least to my mom, so while she didn't automatically believe me, she at least questioned what had happened. I'm arguing with the principal at this point, so finally my mom suggests that we just ask the other kids what happened and see what they say. We go to the classroom and ask what happened at lunch and they have no idea what anyone's talking about. The principal still refuses to believe them and thinks they either just didn't see it or thought it was funny and didn't want to tell on me. My mom got pissed and signed me out of class, and that is how I got a half day that one time. Oh, and paddled twice for phantom mooning the cafeteria. Even though this is a little late and probably won't be seen, this still pisses me off to this day, and I'm in a ranting mood currently. So in my sophomore history class my best friend and I caused a little bit of trouble. Nothing bad, just a super strict teacher who go on to us insane amounts, and the day before winter break my friend drew a massive penis on a desk in pencil. Teacher found out and got him in trouble before the day ended. He was given a detention he was to serve after winter break, rightfully so looking back on it. The first day of the break he was walking along a road to a friend's house as he does all the time and a driver swerved off the road and hit him. The driver didn't stop because he had his young son in the car with him and didn't want his son to see that. He also didn't call 911. So my friend was laying on the side of the road for a few hours, country road in a small town, before anyone noticed. I got word of what happened and was also told he was in a coma. A month later after the break he unfortunately passed away. The teacher called me into the hall and asked if I needed any help because she knew we were close. I told her I didn't need any help as I had all of our mutual friends and my family to help me through that time. She then proceeds to tell me that, since the detention was unserved, since he was in a coma and now dead, that I had to serve it. There was a little argument between the school and me, but in the end they backed up their teacher and made me serve it, threatening to give me even more punishment. TLDR, had to serve a detention because my best friend died. I can think of a few stories. I wasn't the most well-behaved child. I think I racked up over 100 write-ups in 7th grade. But I believe it all started on this day. Lunchtime comes. I'm in the 3rd grade. The options for lunch were noodles with a big as meatball and some nasty looking pasta sheet. Well, for kids who forgot lunch or didn't have anything, they made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for free. I didn't like or want either of the choices, so I insisted on paying for the PB&J. I pay the money, get a sandwich and sit down. Next thing I know, my teacher and the lunch ladies are yelling at me, telling me how terrible I am. Few years later, I'm in 7th grade. My math teacher is absent. She leaves a list of assignments on what we should do. The sub is an older man. He tells us to be quiet and lay our heads on our desk. I wasn't having that sheet. I took my book up to him and demanded he teach me. Another girl caught on and started to do the same. Within 30 minutes, I shit you not, every student left the classroom. Over 20 of us were suspended for leaving. Few weeks later, math teacher is absent. I'm having a shitty day. I'm in my seat doing the assigned work before the tardy bell rings. This sub comes and asks for my name. I tell him. He says I'm on a list and I gotta go next door. I'm like, what the fuck? But whatever, I'll go. The teacher they send me to hates me. One day she tried to embarrass me in class. Told me it'd be nothing more than a garbage man. I quickly let her know I'd be making more than she does if that happens. Anyways, this wasn't the same day. That happened a few months before. Well, I get to her class and she sits me in the timeout chair. Okay, whatever. Well, she tells the class they can talk quietly. I talk to some kid close by me and she tells me I'm not allowed. I'm like, why? I explained I didn't do anything to be punished and wasn't there for a timeout. She tells me it's because I have a reputation. I threatened to call some local family divorce attorneys. Back in 6th form, year 12, age 17, we had the worst biology teacher ever. She was an absolute cow. Always moody, always unhappy. Anyways, one of these days she was having a massive beach fit at everyone, even students she walked past, about the random sheet like hair is dyed, the hair parting was wrong, shirt was not ironed, etc. Moan etc. And then lucky me has a class with her. Now before I go further, I must explain something. I wasn't a troublemaker in school, but I had the habit of losing concentration or distracting others. Some would say I was difficult, but all I knew was I was funny, or so I thought. Back to the class. She is in a foul mood and complaining at us for talking during experiments, and I accidentally dropped my pen on the floor, so I push my chair back, the crappy plastic science desk chairs, and it screeches along the floor a bit and I pick up my pen. This beach of a teacher shouts detention. See me at the end of class. Now, I do not usually back down from being blamed for stupid things. This was one of the times. So funny, me says, wow, do you mean I'm going to have to show my parents I got a detention for picking up a pen? They will be so disappointed in me. Whole class laughs and starts saying shit like that is such a stupid reason etc. So the teacher has lost control and then she bursts into tears and runs out. Few minutes later, the head of science comes in and yells at us, and I still had to do my detention for dropping my pen, yet the report card said disturbing the class. I wasn't doing great in my earth sciences class, barely passing grades. Wanting to get better grades, I decided to straighten up and start studying 3 days before the test instead of the night before. MIND equals BLOWN on that revelation. Regrettably, I was nervous test day and may have been a tad overzealous on the good old scantrons. In my defense, in my day they were also very lackluster and prone to mistakes in my school, unless you filled in the circle exactly. Well, we were reviewing the test and I saw I got again, with only a slightly better grade. However, the teacher would go through the answers and regrade a test if there were mistakes from the scantron point. Turns out, the machine marked me wrong for about 4 to 5 answers, making my grade go from substandard to really good point. After about the third time raising my hand to say I got the right answer, I was greeted with this lovely response. Stop raising your hand. You are not that smart. You are a liar and a cheat. You are lucky to be passing this class, and you must be cheating. Apparently the paradox of being told that if I didn't do better I wouldn't pass the class/regents if I didn't study, and then actually doing better blew out the flux capacitors in my teacher's brain. I will never forget the look on that fat hag's face when she told me my grade for the regents. She sighed heavily, saying 89. I was a very well-behaved kid in primary school. In 6th grade I had a Belgian teacher, and from the first day of school we didn't get along. No matter what I did he would fail me. My father even came to the school to talk about it with the principal. At Christmas time we had to produce a scene of the nativity and I made, according to everyone, a very good one out of clay. And he still gave me an F. So as he's walking along in the row, I just made a big ball with the clay and threw it at his head. He ended up hitting the blackboard full head on, and he was bleeding profusely. I don't have to explain that I was sent to the principal office and they agreed that I should be expelled and that if I wanted to come back to school, it will be with my dad and with excuses to Mr. Van de Velde. And all this happened just before the Christmas holiday. Bad feeling all through the holidays. First day of school in January, we go to school early, so my dad won't miss work, and the principal acknowledged that there was a problem between the teacher and myself, and said he would change me of class, but that, since I had hurt the teacher, that I needed a punishment. So he took me to the new class and let me settle in. I was wondering what would be the punishment, and since nothing happened all morning, I was thinking that I got away with it. But, after lunch, the principal came to my class and asked me to step outside, and he gave me the strap. It was a cowhide strap, and I got 10 slaps on my left hand. I could not help crying like a baby because it did hurt so bad. After composing myself, I was sent back to class, and since everybody knew about the problem they were all sympathetic. Now the new teacher I got, Mr. Hubert, is another entire story. He grabbed my ass and tried to kiss me on the mouth on the last day of school. When my parents realized that I was very touchy on some stuff, they made me spill the beans. My dad went to his house and punched him in the face. The year after, that teacher, who was also in charge of the choir, was caught in a wardrobe with a naked little boy. He was banned from teaching, and they moved away shortly after. I really don't know why I wrote this, but it is nice to be at a place where I'm old enough to tell my story, and if you might think you know who I am, keep it to yourself. In elementary school I took a leaf off of a tree, so I got sent to the wall. If you did something bad during recess you had to stand facing the wall for the rest of the time. The teacher said that I was killing the tree. In grade 7 my friend and I went walking behind the school right after we were all let out. A teacher, she could actually be an administrator, I really don't know, saw us and assumed that we were going to go smash a snow fort, so we got detention. The teacher/admin didn't know us, so she wrote out names on a board in the office which stayed up until graduated. In grade 8, detention for having an arm wrestle at lunch. Not me but my friend. In grade 12 he had turned 18 before we graduated and did a long shift, something like 14 hours, the night before. Well, he was too tired to go to his school the next day, so we wrote a note, which was fine as he was now 18, and stayed home. They said that wasn't an excuse, and he got detention. I don't think he ever went to it and no one chased after him. 5 and 6. In grade 3 I got in trouble for bringing a homemade poison. It was tipped with juice from tree berries, so it was probably much more non-lethal than I thought. Dart to school. I also got in trouble for spelling fuck and other non-offensive words on the school wall at recess with a chalk rock. We got caught, but they never found the swears that we admitted to. Anyway, my friend and I got yelled at pretty bad in class. I made the situation worse by forging my mom's signature on the slip that went home explaining what I did wrong. Considering what I did, I actually got off pretty easily for it, but I think it was because they were more concerned over the fact that they thought I couldn't write a pretty simple 4-letter word. For context, I attended a conservative Christian high school. Wearing any band t-shirts was not allowed. Christian band or secular didn't matter. I was a straight A student, member of the student council, led the school chapel singing, led 0-hour Bible studies on Wednesdays. I never got in trouble. Ever. One day I was wearing a nice brown sweater to school, and underneath it had a brown Bob Marley shirt on. Its color matched perfectly, and I wanted to make sure if any of the undershirt neck poked out it wouldn't be too noticeable. I was taking a test in calculus and the room got really warm, so I took off my sweater for the duration of the test, probably had Bob Marley visible for 20 minutes, and the teacher was the only person who could have noticed. Everyone else was taking a test without saying anything to me. My super timid math teacher proceeded to email the principal to let him know that I was violating dress code. I put my sweater back on before I walked out of the classroom, only to be greeted by the principal. He took me down to his office. Apparently he had already called my parents, and they told him not to cut me any slack. Even though I had a sweater on, he asked me to show him the t-shirt. I tried explaining what had happened, but he didn't listen and gave me a week of 1-hour detentions after school. And whose classroom was that detention in? The faking math teachers, of course. Needless to say, I was eager to graduate. When I was in elementary school, there was this one kid on the bus who would pick on me. He was the only one, and I otherwise led a normal school life, not bullied or anything, but there was this one kid who would constantly seek me out when he got on the bus, sit behind me, and poke me, throw stuff at me, place stiff on my hair and clothes gently so I wouldn't notice, and walk around with it. Now I wasn't a violent kid. I told my parents about it, complained to the teachers and principal about it, and every time they would just ignore the complaints. My parents did the same. After I told them about it, they talked with teachers and principal as well, but they were also ignored. The severity of the kid's annoyances went up, and he started hitting me sometimes in addition to the other thing. It wasn't hard enough to seriously injure me, but it was extremely annoying and it hurt. Again, me and my parents' complaints were ignored. One day, he sat behind me on the bus and started doing his thing. I stood up, turned around and clocked him square in the face. All it took was one call from his parents and suddenly I'm in school suspension and in a lot of trouble, all enforced by the school's principal, who has heard all of our complaints about this kid and his bullying. My parents were outraged that the kid never got into trouble, but the one time I retaliated I get in huge trouble. That motherfucker never went near me again, so it definitely showed him what's up, but still, suspension sucked. OFFS. Here's two from 3rd grade. Both were actually wrong accusations, and reading threads like this rekindles my bitterness. Keep in mind I follow rules to a fault, and would never willingly disobey. First time, I thought of something funny I wanted to tell this boy named Will. He was sitting at a computer, and I was at my desk. I whispered his name, and did that come here signal with my finger, except that I was holding a bunch of stuff, so I used my middle finger. His eyes go wide, he runs off, teacher comes over, he says I flicked him off, or something. I had no effing clue what I did, and it was another 4 years before I learned the gesture of flipping the bird. Seriously. Second time, it was lunch recess and the playground was closed because of heavy rains. I didn't even use the playground anyway, because this playground Nazi duty set it up so that only one grade could play at a time, and all I did was jump rope or sit along the wall. We go inside and start to do a Christmas project when I get called into the hall because like 3 kids claimed to have seen me climbing on the playground. I burst into full-on sobs and panic because, like I said, I follow rules to a fault. It was someone who had the same color coat as me. I didn't get in trouble, but by the time I got back in, the Christmas craft was over. I still have the half-finished beaded candy cane to this day, and it makes me pissed every time it's put on the tree. I wrote a nasty email to an internet stranger about shaving with his wife, and almost got expelled. In high school, my friends and I played EverQuest. We were in a guild. There was a rival guild on our server named Scarab. It was led by a guy named Hawk, and in game he was married to a female dwarf. My friends and I posted on their message board, and were subsequently banned. This was unacceptable to us. We were being oppressed and silenced. So we spammed their webpage until their shitty internet forum went down, and sent Hawk an email where we created a nasty acronym for their guild name, and made other disparaging remarks, including a snide comment about shaving with his wife in the morning. Yes, we did all this from our school's computer lab. For what it is worth, the female dwarf's neck had the option for full beards. Anyway, we were eventually caught when he backtraced us and complained to our rather prestigious full scholarship Jesuit high school. I had to sit in the room with the dean of discipline and go over the text of the email. It was mortifying. I attempted to explain some of the insults that were based on the game itself or on the detailed stories posted on the guild's homepage, but it was not well received. I narrowly avoided expulsion and had to serve about a month worth of justice under God, our version of detention. 6th grade. Laughing at recess with my friend. We were hanging out by ourselves, not hurting anyone or doing anything nefarious, just cracking jokes and laughing. The safety aides didn't like that we were having fun, and we both got a month's worth of detention. My teacher was pissed and got me off the hook, but my friend got stuck with a full month and grounded for 2 months by his parents' high school, sophomore year. Being punched in the face without doing anything that could be viewed as provocation, and even having 2 teachers defend me to the vice principal. The VP hated me and put me, my girlfriend, and the girl who punched me in the face into in-school suspension for 3 days. That was fun. High school, senior year. I only had a half day, so I could leave after lunch. I stayed an extra period to talk, harass, to one of my favorite teachers and then left. On my way out I waved to the only cool security guard, just like I did every day an hour earlier, and he flipped his lid. Written up for ditching, even though I proved that I had a half day. Got out of that one after they verified my ID was legitimate the next day. High school, senior year. Got written up for showing my friend the socks I had in my backpack. Legit. I was being written up for some goddamned socks. They searched my backpack and, holy shit, only socks and homework. At this point I was tired of being harassed by security, so I decided to be a smartass. The security knew my name, but still asked for it, and, well, he was pretty pissed when he wrote down and said my name aloud in front of my friends. I have to say, detention for a week was worth having the security guard lose his mind in anger when he realized my name wasn't bend over. Typing too fast. 2 different instances of that happening. In 2000 I got some money for my birthday and ended up buying a Dreamcast off of a friend as well as some of his games. One of the games was Typing of the Dead, which included a keyboard. I didn't really know how to type. I had used a keyboard before in the past, but it was very much looking down at the keys and going letter by letter, not a very efficient system. The game was pretty unforgiving. You had to touch typing, and you had to be pretty fast to get anywhere. I loved the game though, so I naturally got pretty quick at it. This coupled with a love affair of mic later meant that I had a pretty quick typing speed. Fast forward to 2002, 8th grade, junior high, we get our first typing class. I go in there and immediately blow everyone out of the water. I think I clocked in at a speed of 85 WPM. This was apparently faster than our teacher could type, which caused her some frustration, but what upset her even further was the fact that I didn't use home row. I didn't have any formal training, I just went with what felt natural and comfortable to me. After maybe a week of trying to get me to use the home row and refusing to do so, she gave up, threw me out of the class saying clearly you don't need it. I was sent to the library during that hour for the rest of the year. The second time was in high school, sophomore year. Again we were required to take a typing class. First day we are given a test to see where our proficiency is, and I think I clocked in around 120 WPM. I was in that class for a bit longer, maybe a month, before the teacher decided that my typing was a distraction and ruining the confidence of the other students, and I was subsequently kicked out. Fortunately, I was never accused of cheating, unlike at my first job. Data entry, took a test, did 145 WPM, and was really proud of myself. Was the fastest I had done yet on a test. Employer made me take it 3 more times before deciding that I was in fact not cheating. Went to a rundown high school with shoddy, well, everything. Finished app testing and was carrying my books from one building to another, and the door into that building was locked, as it normally is. I tried to knock with my hands to get the attention of the teachers standing on the exact other side of the door, and nothing. My girlfriend at the time tried as well, with her hands free, and still no response. My next automatic thought was to tap it with my foot, so as not to drop the books, etc. I do so, and the entire glass paneling of the door was essentially a reinforced piece of glass with a metal frame, called a door, shattered. Huge cracks up and down this 7 feet tall door, and then one of the teachers, the special ed teacher, turns and looks at me through the stained glass and says, "Now if you'll knock correctly I might let you in." Keep in mind this door was at least 30 years old, and the glass had never been replaced. Needless to say, I nearly threw down the books and walked off right there, but my then girlfriend told me not to. Insert whip noise here. As a junior in high school, that was the first time I had gotten in trouble. I was in angry tears. Special ed teacher tells me to go to the principal's office, and I'm already halfway there. I sit as he barked at me for a while, then he called my mom. When I heard my mom's voice over the phone, I saw the principal's face change from anger and disappointment to pure fear. Nonetheless, I got suspended for 3 days TLDR. Barely kicked an ancient door in my high school with my foot. It shatters. I get suspended for being disrespectful. Never told my side of the story to anyone on the school board. I've got a few points in the first grade. I was written up. 3 led to suspension for making out with a girl on the bus. I'm sure it was just a lot of face pounding with extended tongues, but whatever. I still feel like a little playboy for the situation. Point in 5th grade, my buddies and I were pretty rough with each other. Like really, we would hit the fuck out of one another. Well, one day, while waiting in line to leave the lunchroom, my buddy hits me. In response, I place my hands on his shoulders and bring my knee up, as if to hit him in the groin. Instinctively, he jumps back. I never intended to make contact, nor did I. Well, this special ed teacher saw it happen and comes over screaming at me, "What makes you think you can do that?" Awestruck as I was by this, she takes me down to the principal. She goes in and explains the situation to the principal while I wait outside, and then I get called in and the principal, who up until this point I thought was a very nice lady, starts screaming the same bullshit at me. I was just confused and kept denying it, but it took a testimony from my friend for them to believe me. In the 6th grade, someone reported me and said that I was planning to bring a gun to school. Serious shit. Cops stopped me at the bus stop and searched me. Found nothing obviously. I got to school and they were talking to me about it, and I explained that I was talking about a video game. Their rationalization was, "Since you're in all honors classes, we cannot believe that you didn't know what you are talking about. We are going to have a meeting to decide whether you will be expelled or suspended." I ended up with in-school suspension after a well-written essay explaining my remorse for the situation. It was a real beach, honestly, especially since I'm pretty positive that the person who reported me for this shit was the older brother of my friend. My theory is that he was being a little beach because I was mean to him a few days prior. Lol. I was about 8 to 9 years old and some older kids from secondary school, probably truanting, had come onto our field. They showed us and encouraged us to do this thing where one person distracts/talks to someone, and while they're talking, someone else gets on all fours behind the person, at which point the person distracting then pushes their unwitting victim over the back of their conspirator. It had happened to me, so when the head teacher started talking about it, I was determined not to tell them who had done it. The problem was I was so focused on not telling that I'd not been paying attention to the question asked. When I raised my hand I started replaying what had been said when the head teacher solely concentrated on me for their ire, whereby I realized they'd asked for who had been doing it rather than who had had it done to them. So my intention to be tight-lipped about the idiots doing it was irrelevant. The head teacher concentrated on me, asking me rhetorical questions like, was I wanting more customers? I was a volunteer for the St. John's Ambulance Brigade. Explaining that it was unpaid seemed the least of things I wanted to say at that point, but no opportunity didn't present itself, and I drew the brunt of the verbal assault, and was told to sit in the hall alone with the others admitters of guilt spaced as far as possible. In silence to think about our actions. A feeling of injustice still sits strongly with me, even though it was my own fault. TLDR didn't pay attention and wrongly admitted to guilt. This is pretty faked, but it's a story about my little brother's friend, we'll call him Lee, that happened when they were 10. Lee is a large framed kid who is really goddamn funny, as in, he says shit that is funny by adult standards. He has a crude sense of humor and he's big and loud, the natural enemy of elementary school teachers. Now there is this other kid we'll call Nathan. For my brother's 9th birthday Nathan wrote him an incredibly well written poem. He sits still, plays 6 instruments, has straight A's, and never ever goes outside. His parents won't allow him to go to a sleepover until he is 16. We didn't have the heart to tell them that kids usually go out and booze instead of having sleepovers at 16. He is an elementary school teacher's wet dream. Lee and Nathan have a weird relationship. A year or so prior to all of this Nathan freaked the fuck out and tried to strangle Lee at recess. It was weird and unexpected. Nathan was not punished because he was so well behaved that they assumed it was an accident or that Lee must have done something to deserve it. Odd kid, weird family that was overprotective and didn't like Lee point. So last year there's this whole big thing of Nathan accusing Lee of sexually abusing another boy. His story was obviously fabricated. It involved him peering through a hole in the wall into the change room and seeing Lee acting in a way that can only be described as cartoonishly evil before anally rapping the other kid. There were other kids around at the time, nothing to substantiate the story. The kid who was supposedly rapped is a good friend of my brother's. In fact, he is my favorite of my bro's friends. This kid will sing like Chuck from the Goonies if you ask him anything. Anytime he was around kids playing any video game above an E rating, or who said something inappropriate, he would have a long discussion with his mother about how to deal with people acting inappropriately. He was mortified when he heard Nathan had said this shit. Not scared that he would get in trouble, not upset and finally letting it all out. Nope, shocked that anyone could imagine such a situation. Anyways, Child Services launches an investigation into Lee's family to see if he himself had been abused. For the duration of the investigation, Lee's father and brothers were not permitted to be alone with Lee or any other children. The school is also involved. The incident supposedly took place at the change room at a public pool, so we don't know why the fact the school was involved, but the principal tells all of Lee's teachers about his alleged abuse of Chunk, and he is assigned a personal supervisor for recess. The investigation is closed. They conclude that Nathan must have made it all up. No one investigates Nathan's family to try and understand how a kid could make up such a graphic, sexually violent story. I think he was abused. It ties in with the whole sheltered life, don't leave the family home type of deal. They do not rescind Lee's supervision. The boys are in middle school now. Nathan goes to a different school. Lee goes to school with my brother and Chunk still. They're all cool with it, but they thought it was weird that they had to talk to the police. The new school was warned about Lee, so there's still a black mark there. The school was the worst, Child Services was alright, and the police were awesome. All in all, I give the situation a 2/10. Being a good speller, my 3rd grade teacher, 3rd grade is for 8 and 9-year-olds, had us do spelling tests which we then swapped amongst each other to grade along with instruction from the teacher. Me, being a very good reader and writer, looked down the list in front of me and, before the teacher had made it through the correct spelling of the second word, corrected all the words the other student had spelled wrong. My task completed, I set the paper aside and pulled a book out of my desk, quietly reading while she trudged on through the rest of the words. At some point, she noticed that I had stopped grading and was reading. She told me to quit reading and get back to checking his paper. I told her I had already graded said paper and figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. My teacher flew toward me, enraged. She snatched the paper off my desk and scanned it, clearly gleeful at the idea of catching me in an error. Unfortunately for her, I had made no such errors, and thus she had no power. I waited. "You're being insubordinate. Go sit in the hall while I finish with the rest of the class," she screeched at me. I was taken aback. Never in my school career had I ever been in trouble. In fact, I had always been a favorite student of my previous teachers. Confused and getting somewhat teary, I went out into the hall and waited, pondering what I had done. So wrong. After 10 minutes or so, my teacher joined me in the hall, a freshly penned note in her hand. "Take this and go to the principal's office. He'll be calling your mother." My mother was indeed called and came up to the school immediately, having left work to do so. For whatever reason, the principal tried to take the teacher's side in this, saying that it might have been a misunderstanding, or I might have had an attitude with her at the time of the incident. Meanwhile, I'm sitting outside the office, alternating between emotions. I felt the quick burning rage of injustice and the heavy weight of resignation and sadness as I recall. Nothing was settled. The teacher went on hating me for inexplicable reasons, and I went on trying to stay under her radar. But seriously, the only time in my entire scholastic career that I was sent to the principal was for being able to spell above the level my teacher felt appropriate. Good times. TLDR, my 3rd grade teacher punished me for excelling at the subject she was teaching. What a beach. When I was in 12th grade I did some drugs. A lot of them actually. Like every day smoked weed, and every couple of days did pills and whatever. I cleaned up my act after I graduated, and I'm a poster child for America. Well, this day in school I was high sitting in the bathroom listening to music. When I came out of the store my friend was in there laughing, and I chased him pretending I was a dinosaur, because you know drugs and everything. I was a faking T-Rex. Well, turns out my friend had like 5 milk cartons that he smashed in there, and that's why he was laughing, and they had me on camera running out of the bathroom like that. My friend had been to the principal before me and said he didn't do it, and I thought I was getting in trouble for being stupid trying to be a dinosaur. Well, the principal asked me what I was doing, and I said going to the bathroom, and he showed me the video. Me being high, I thought the video was hilarious, but he did not. He asked if I threw the milks, and I said no. He asked if I saw someone throw them, because some teachers or something had been in there right before and right after or something. I again say no. He keeps saying surely I saw it, since I was in there. I then told him that he may look around while other men have their genitals out, but I do not. He didn't find that funny either. A real killjoy, I know, and gave me detention. 2 weeks later my table for breakfast before school had left some trash on the table. He said I did it, and I said I did not. He watched the video, and it showed me eating the food, then skipped to where it was just trash. I again said not my trash. He wouldn't believe me and kept showing the 2 short clips. I then asked to see what happens between the 2 short clips, and wouldn't you know it, I got up and threw away my trash. He gave me detention for not throwing away someone else's trash, even though I left before them. Me and that guy did not get along well. A little late, but fits the thread, so why not? In 4th grade, I had a teacher who we'll call Ms. M. She was my English teacher. I hated doing things like writing stories from writing prompts, which we did often. I often didn't even write more than a few sentences over the whole period. However, since I was pretty smart for my age, I could pass all of the tests with relative ease. This made her really dislike me. Because of my terrible memory, I would always forget to bring a pencil. Well, one day, she must have had a bad day, because when I asked to borrow a pencil, I would always give it back at the end of the period. She got really mad and marched me to a side office to call my mom and tell her I needed to remember to bring pencils. After I got home, my mom said she didn't really care because we had plenty of pencils and agreed the teacher must have had a bad day. So, she gets about 10 pencils and rubber bands them together and puts them in my backpack. She tells me to not take them all out at once and lose them, and says to share with a friend if I need to point next day. I get to her class. She walks up with a smirk and asks if I've remembered my pencil. Honestly thinking nothing of it, I said yes I did, and pulled out my bundle of pencils. Her face went from ugly to beet red. She grabbed me by the arm and marched me to the side office again. She calls my mom and says, well, Custodes decided he was going to be a little smarter today and mock me by bringing a whole big bundle of pencils. What do you think we should do about that? I heard the other end of the phone stay silent for a few seconds before faintly hearing, let me faking tell you something, followed by the color raining from her face and that smirk slipping into a look of regret. The satisfaction I felt from hearing my mom verbally tear this woman to shreds while she knew she could do absolutely nothing about it was unrivaled. For bonus points as well, when she grabbed me by the arm in her little pussy fit, she left a decent little red mark there. It didn't break skin or leave a welt or anything like that, and I honestly thought nothing of it. She saw that when I got home and asked who did it, and I told her about it. My memory on it is somewhat vague, but I can recall playing in my front yard and being able to hear my mom yell from her bedroom. And if you ever lay another faking hand on my child again, so help me God. 7th grade. My younger sister had a chorus recital at the middle school, which I was forced to attend. Being the crazy young kid I was, I couldn't sit still and found myself out in the lobby where I bumped into some friends. We headed outside for a snowball fight in the middle of the quad. The quad is located right in the middle of the school. Most windows on the inside can see the whole quad. We got sick of throwing snowballs, so I started dragging my foot through the snow to draw a circle. Being the right page of draw is on everything, we proceeded to draw a big old donger in the snow about 30 feet long. To top it off, we drew a Miss Pac-Man looking face at end of the tip. Fast forward through the weekend, I walk into my first class to see everyone huddled around the window giggling. I took a peek for myself, and lo and behold, the snow had melted down the grass only where we had drawn our masterpiece. You pretty much had to be blind not to see the big old one right in the middle of the school. 3 classes later, all 3 of us got called over the loudspeaker. Word had spread like wildfire we were the troubled artists behind this masterpiece. After being greeted by the principal as Picasso, I ended up with 4 days after school detention after they presented me and my parents 3 different Polaroid pictures at 3 different angles. My father told me a few years later that the vice principal called him back into his office after our meeting to tell him how hysterical he thought the whole situation was, and apparently he still has the Polaroids today. TLDR. I drew a donger in the snow and got detention. Literally being unable to stay awake. In my sophomore year of high school, I had geometry, and every day, I'd fall asleep, no matter how much sleep I'd gotten the night before. Not on purpose. It's not like I was laying my head down and covering myself with a blanket. I just could not stay awake. I'd be genuinely trying to work, and then it would suddenly get really hard. I'd feel drained of all energy, my eyelids felt super heavy, and I'd end up asleep sitting straight up, positioned as if I were still working. It's a medical condition I have that hasn't been diagnosed, but it's something that still happens to this day. So I got in trouble for falling asleep in class, even though pretty much everyone who saw me could agree that I wasn't doing it on purpose. And what was my teacher's solution? Kick me out. She made me stand outside in the hallway, like I was rebelling instead of having a medical problem. And so what ended up happening was that, if I were in class, I'd miss the lesson, because I was asleep, and then she'd kick me out and not give me the work. And she basically told me not to do any of the things I tried to keep myself awake. Alternating between drawing and working was getting me off track. I couldn't chew gum, because no one else could. I couldn't bounce my leg, because it was apparently disruptive. I ended up failing her class with like a 20%, because I couldn't learn anything, because I was always either asleep, getting kicked out for sleeping, or getting yelled at for trying to keep myself from sleeping. Sneezing too loudly in class. I was a junior in high school, 16 years old, and sneezed in my world history class. My teacher screamed at me to get the hell out of his classroom and stop being disruptive. He then came outside, screamed at me, told me I was a horrible person and student, and that he was calling my parents for an emergency meeting as the behavior was unacceptable. I was completely baffled. He called my parents and said there was a huge emergency and they had to come right away, but wouldn't tell them why. Mom couldn't come, but dad did. Teacher lectures my dad for 5 minutes about what a horrible student I am. Dad asked him if I had missed any exams or big assignments. Teacher says no. Dad asks how many classes I've missed and if I'm suspect of ditching. Teacher checks the roll and finds I have not missed a single class. Dad asked what my grade was. Teacher says B 82%. Dad asked him what I had done to demand he leave work and lose hard-earned money for the day. Teacher told him that I sneezed way too loudly with the intention of riling up other students. Dad just stared at the teacher for a 5 seconds with a death stare, then slowly nodded his head and said, "Okay, do or say what you want with my kid, but don't ever call me out of work for such a ridiculous reason again. Don't ever call me again when my kid naturally sneezes, a normal bodily function, and has a B in your class and perfect attendance. But you want to give him detention, yell at him, tell him to stand outside the class, fine, I don't care, but don't call me and have me leave work for that reason," and then shook hands with the teacher and walked away. Later at dinner dad told me my teacher was an idiot, but to keep my head low and be extra careful, to not stand out in any way and just pass his class and move on. Which is what I did, but still ridiculous. I'm not the one who got punished, but I saw both what happened and the punishment point. When I was in high school, our school had a class where you could earn credits for essentially acting as a REA for classrooms belonging to the younger students. The school ran all the way from K-12, so 2 of us, myself grade 11 and a friend grade 12, were assigned to the kindergarten class for the block. The kindergarten teacher had taught 3 generations of students. Some of the kids in this class were the grandchildren of people she had taught as a young woman. She was a notorious disciplinarian and a massive bitch, but only to students she didn't have a history with. The students had been assigned a page to color. One of them, a new addition to the small town we called home, made the tragic mistake of taking a white pencil crayon out of his case. She laid the authority smack down on him instantly, confiscating the crayon because we don't use white pencil crayons. You can stay in for recess. Bullshit. Punishment number 1. My friend, heroically, given this teacher's reputation, tried to argue on behalf of the child. She shut him down instantly, barred him not only from the room, but from that wing of the school, and ordered him to the principal's office for the audacity of daring to question her authority. The principal overturned her decision to bar him from the entire wing. We had classes at that end, but ruled that he had to write a letter of apology to the teacher, demonstrating that he knew what he had done wrong in order to receive the credits he was due for the class. She, unfortunately, had to sign off that he had attended, and she wasn't about to do that until she had what she wanted. He wrote multiple drafts, all of which were rejected. All of them were some variation around this central theme. I deeply apologize for attempting to stand up for a person who could not stand up for themselves. In the future I will allow those with power to run roughshod over those beneath them. 2nd or 3rd grade. The bell rang to end recess, and I was walking to where we line up to go into class. When I walked past the tether ball I hit it with my hand as I went by. Suddenly I heard a whistle blowing, and one of the male teachers screaming at me to get up against the fence. I'm standing against a chain link fence with a few other kids that had gotten in trouble for something. We're all standing there frozen, like we are convicts that tried to escape prison, but the spotlight caught us. The teacher comes over to scream at me some more, and starts writing me a green slip. Green slips were a huge deal, and meant you faked up big time. If you got one you had to take it home for your parents to sign, and you had to stay after school on Friday for detention. I died 1,000 deaths before the end of the day. I grew up in an extremely dysfunctional environment, and I was already imagining the beating I was going to get for bringing home a green slip. We had a live-in sitter, who I've described before as the Goebbels to my mother's Hitler, who would pick us up from school, and on the way home I was freaking the hell out. I tried to play it casual, and said something like, "Yeah, so what would you do if I got a green slip?" Like I'm posing a hypothetical question. My sitter looks like she can't wait to turn me in, gets this messed up grin on her face and holds out her hand and says, "Let me see it." She reads it, and her smile disappears, hitting the tether ball after the bell rang. What the fuck is this sheet? In 6th grade I saw this kid, Ryan Lasagna, crying outside after lunch during our recess. It was middle school, so it was uncool to call it recess. We called him Lasagna because his last name rhymed with it or something. Lasagna was kind of a loner with some anger problems, and I felt bad for him, so I wanted to see what's up. Being the awkward kid I was, I didn't just tap him on the shoulder, but picked up a couple pea-sized pieces of gravel and gently tossed them at his back to get him to respond. He never said a thing, so I gave up and went back to trying to get girls to notice me and similar shenanigans. A couple hours later, I'm sitting in class learning Photoshop or something when my principal storms in the room and yells, "Where is Margot?" I raised my hand and politely got up. I'd never been in trouble, so I assumed it had to be good news. Poor assumption in retrospect. Anyway, we get to his office and tells me that Lasagna came into his office and told him I'd pelted him with fist-sized rocks outside repeatedly. Fist-sized? There weren't even fist-sized rocks on that courtyard. I refuted and explained to him, but apparently he even showed him a welt on his back to validate his story. I specifically remembered him getting hit with a tennis ball during gym in the exact same spot that day. Lasagna fucking framed me. I'm still pissed about it. I thought I was going to jail. Actually, I did go to middle school jail, aka the White Room, for an hour anyway. Never forgave him. Still bitter. Lasagna. There was a kid in my middle school with the same last name as me. One day, I was home alone because I was sick and had a fever. At about 12:30ish, there was a knock at the door. It was a police officer. I opened the door for him, and he asked if I had a parent home. I didn't, and he called my mom, who then rushed home. So apparently someone told the principal that this other kid, who was a known druggie, had weed on him. He accidentally thought it was me, and not the other kid. The principal then was going to call me into his office, but because I wasn't there, the procedure was to contact the parent, but my mother didn't answer. They only had her cell number, which was dead, and not her work number, so then they contacted the police. When my mother came home, the cop briefed her on the whole situation, how there were reports I had drugs, and he asked if he could search the house. My mom is a guilty until proven innocent type parent, so she gave me a death stare as she led the officer into my room. After going through my entire room and not finding anything, the officer then grilled me to see if I was hiding it anywhere else. After getting nothing out of me, cause there was nothing to get, I don't smoke weed, he left and said, "Have a good day." My mother then grilled me about the whole thing, and it was at this point I made the realization that they were looking for this other kid and not me. The next day, we brought this up to the principal, who later that day called the kid down and found that he had weed on him. I didn't get in trouble, but that sheet really pissed me off. Even though I wasn't guilty of anything, my mom is terrifying when she is mad. TLDR kid had same last name as me and was suspected of having weed. Principal thought it was me, and a cop searched my house. I've got 2 stories. In elementary school we were all faking around doing some little sheety project and some kid was being really annoying, and so when he left I thought I would get back at him by breaking his highlighter and putting it back into his bag. Well, this kid could dish it out, but couldn't take it. So now he's crying to the teacher because I broke his highlighter and I got a detention. I told my mother what happened, and she was mad at me, but more mad at the teacher about what happened, and she said that she would buy the kid a whole pack of highlighters if it was that serious. The detention was dropped. So freshman year of high school I had a locker in second hall of the building, and apparently that is a prime spot for lockers. I had a really messy locker because I would just take a big book bag, put all my books and stuff in there for the day, so I wouldn't have to go to my locker during the day, since we only had 5-minute passing periods and most of my classes did not go through second hall. Eventually I just threw whatever in my locker, and it started spilling out papers. Oftentimes I would just kick it closed and leave the papers on the floor, since there was always sheet on the floor anyway. One teacher had to play detective and picked up one of my papers and got me called down to the office, where I was greeted with a detention for having a messy locker and presented with the paper the teacher found in a plastic bag like some sort of CSI bullshit. I tried to get out of it, but I couldn't, and I just ended up serving my detention, and we got let out early for some reason. I ended up requesting a locker change, and I got it. I eventually started tearing my name off my papers and leaving them on the floor of second hall as payback though. I got detention once and almost failed my math class last year because of a teacher I had. Most of my teachers at school are pretty chill, and they let you do whatever, so long as it's not disruptive/distracting to other students, and so long as you have your work done. The teachers also encourage students to only take the notes they need to take, like things they won't remember, so the class can take less time writing notes, and engage in discussion/problem solving/working on homework instead. During class I tend to absent-mindedly doodle/write down thoughts, because it helps me relax and focus on what's being taught better. So I was writing down some thoughts as the teacher was giving our class a lecture. She put up a note on the board, and it was something I wouldn't forget. It was Pythagorean theorem, something we've learned the past 3 years, so I didn't write down the note. She comes over to me and tells me to write the note. I tell her I don't need to because I remember it, therefore I don't have to write it down. She told me I was being disruptive and told me to leave the class. So I grabbed my things and went into the hall. From there, she told me I was being disrespectful to the class. I asked her how, and instead of answering my question, she essentially told me I was stupid and that I should be taking a lower level of math, despite the fact that the previous years, before I was getting decent marks in math, mid to high 70s and above. She told me to go to the office, but instead I just went to the library. We have one connected to our school that isn't actually a part of our school. The next day I got detention and she almost failed me. Luckily, one of the vice principals took notice to my grades and called me in to speak with me about it. She was incredibly nice and suggested that I go to the student help center at second period instead of my math class to get help from one of the teachers there, since it was too late for me to switch out of the class. At midterms, I had a 49%, but with the help of Mr. M, I was able to pull my mark up to a 67% and pass the course point later in the year. I found out that Mrs. S, my math teacher, had failed almost everyone in all 4 of her classes that semester, save for a few students. This year, she's not at our school anymore. She was either fired or got moved to another school by our school board. Thank God she's gone. She was a terrible teacher and anyone who had her never had anything nice to say about her. Not only did she fail students, but I had personally witnessed her flirting with a male student. She's like 60 or some shit too. It was nasty. I went to a Catholic private school. Irrelevant, but I'm an atheist. It was just the best school around. Anyway, they gave every student a MacBook that you use daily and could take home with you. These computers had bullshit restrictions like blocking websites even when you were on your home Wi-Fi. You had no install rights etc. Essentially it was to be used for schoolwork and nothing else. In year 9 kids got to the point where they wanted to be able to do whatever they wanted on these computers. We pay for the faking things, so we should be able to use them like they were ours. A method was found. You could create a hidden administrator account by exploiting single user mode. Hold Command plus S on boot up and type in a bunch of commands. I was way too paranoid to use the method myself, but it was given to me on a USB in case I wanted to use it over the upcoming holidays. A friend of mine wanted me to send him the method, but neither of us had a USB and we were in different classes at the time. Instead of just waiting and giving it to him later, I open up my chat, practically MSN Messenger, find my friend in the list and drag the file over to his name. As I drop the file, more users enter the chat room and I unknowingly drop it on a teacher's name. File sent. Fact 15 minutes later I'm greeted by the system admin, the teacher I sent it to, and my roll call teacher internal suspension for 2 days and lost my laptop for a week just for having the method. Kids who were found to have used the method got warnings or lost their laptop for a day. Freshman year in high school, got my book taken away for reading in class. Instead of just taking it away and giving it back at the end of class and telling me not to do it again, he decided to read the book out loud to my classmates, embarrass the fuck out of an already borderline suicidal freshman. I had gotten inches away from actually trying to go through with it that year. Don't worry, I've not once had suicidal thoughts for years. I ended up spending my lunch crying. Another teacher came up to me asking what's wrong, listened to a nearly incomprehensible sobbing kid, and leave in disbelief at my story, saying they knew that teacher to be nice. I later went to administration, where he turned in my book, and they were like, really, teachers only ever turn in phones. Why would anyone take away a book? Everyone absolutely hated the teacher's guts, and there was one other classmate who read in class often, though looking back on it, he might have been special needs, but I had known him from elementary school, and never had an issue with him, or known anything to be off at the time. So I thought it'd be okay to spend my time doing something I enjoy, rather than listening to a teacher I hate. Yes, I know in hindsight it was a stupid thing to do. I'm not going to give specifics on what things the teacher did all year long, but basically he had zero respect for students, and to no one's astonishment, they had zero respect for him as well. To his defense, that school was full of a bunch of sheetheads who made me want to commit suicide in the first place. Looking back, I can see why he had no respect, but still, I was friends with plenty of good people that year, but the overwhelming amount of terrible people in that school was overwhelming. In 7th or 8th grade, the public school I was at got a new principal. I rarely caused trouble, and was a bookish loner kid, so I pretty much never saw her. Canadian winter rolls around, and it's freezing and very windy outside, but there is only a bit of dry crumpled snow on the ground that we weren't allowed to play with at all point during another freezing 20 minutes of recess, and having no friends to do anything with, I picked up some snow and threw it at the fence that separated the schoolyard from the forest. A teacher spotted me and unenthusiastically told me to go to the office for breaking the rules. In past years, if you did anything to get in trouble during recess, you usually got a slap on the wrist, unless you really caused a lot of harm. This time I'm in the office and it's absolutely packed with other kids. It wasn't a very big office, but about 15 other kids had also broken small rules and been sent to the office. After waiting in line, one of the receptionists asked me why I was there, and I told her why I was sent in. I clearly wasn't the first one to have gotten in trouble for throwing snow, so I was told I would have to spend 4 recesses in the office and call home. I nearly laughed in her face and was laughing softly as I left a message on the phone saying exactly what I did and what my punishment was. When my parents got home later, I immediately told them of the message. They listened, then laughed it off and didn't care. As a bonus for me, for next 4 recesses I got to stay in the nice toasty warm office with all the other delinquents in silence. I did exactly as much there as I would done outside, and didn't have to worry about freezing miles off. Not sure if this counts as punishment, but anyway, here it goes. In middle school, I was in 7th grade. Our classroom buildings would be locked during lunch and recess. So one day, my friends and I decided to hang out around the outside of one of the buildings during lunch. It was getting close to the end of lunch bell ringing, so we stepped closer to the door. As a joke, I tried to anticipate a teacher unlocking and opening the door, so it would look like I just magically unlocked the door by opening it. Lame. I know, I was in middle school. I did this a few times, but had no luck. I got frustrated, so I looked through the door's window for a few seconds to see if anyone was walking up to it, but couldn't see anyone in the halls. Suddenly, for a split second, I heard the door handle click, then POW the metal door slammed into my face, pretty hard too. Next thing I know, this short guy, short enough that he wasn't visible through the window, presumably a faculty member, walked out and noticed what happened. I turned to him, with my red face pancaked on one side, and gave him a what the fuck type look. He proceeded to step up to me. I was much taller than him, even as a 7th grader, and yelled at me for putting his safety at risk by blocking the door. He threatened to take me down to the principal's office so that she could suspend me. I was so baffled by what was going on that I nodded and wasn't sure what to say. He even grabbed my arm at one point in an attempt to show how serious he was, that he would have me written up for what I had done. After a minute of this, he said he'd let me off with a warning, but that I should watch what I did around campus, or else. Looking back on it, I'm not sure if he was having a bad day or if he was just trying to absolve himself of all blame or any possible trouble, but man, he was such a bitter guy. It didn't hurt that bad, but I remember being dumbfounded about possibly getting punished for getting hit in the face. TLDR, random teacher slammed a door in my face, got pissed off at me. Super late to this thread and it's real late here, so I'll do a TLDR of it. I forgot to ask my mom to put lunch money in my account in 4th grade. Therefore, I had to get peanut butter and jelly, and I'm allergic to peanut butter. I get pissed and threw my tray on the tablet, set it down loudly. I still don't know. The teacher came over and was like, "Why are you mad?" And I said, "I'm allergic to PB&J." And she said, "Well, you should have bought lunch money." Obviously this isn't going to accomplish anything, so I ignore her and put my head down. Apparently I was defiant, and so the principal came in. He pretty much said, "Get up and go to my office or I'll carry you there." Mind you, I'm still just sitting with my head down, doing nothing wrong. So 2 seconds later he picks me up around the chest and in the process choking me. He gets scratch marks all over my chest. I have hospital pics somewhere if this comment gets popular, and pretty much choked me to the principal's office all the way down the hall, meanwhile yelling that he's choking me. My dad came to get me after all this, and the principal didn't tell about the whole choking me thing. When I got home, my mom saw the marks and the blood and took me to the hospital. We filed a police report, but couldn't do anything more since we were broke and couldn't get a lawyer. The school system gave me a 1-month suspension, and the teacher got a 1-week paid leave for investigation where literally nothing happened. We left the school then, and a year later our newspaper reported that he had been fired after someone tried to sue the school for the exact thing happening to their child. They won something like $50K. OFC once it hit news the school system claimed this had never happened, and they take reports very seriously. TLDR, forget my lunch money. Principal chokes me and gets nothing done. Happens to another kid a year later, and the principal is sued. Revenge is sweet. Edit. Can't find the pics, but I can't find the news article either. It was back in 2008/2009 or so Google comes up with nothing. However, I found out that another principal got fired for the same thing in another school in the county this year. What the fuck? Not understanding math. I was always a quiet kid, always too scared of getting in trouble to be disruptive or break any rules. I'm still kind of the same way today. 2nd grade, age 7, my teacher flat out told my parents she didn't want me in her class. She felt the fact I had a disability, I'm in a wheelchair, it's nothing behavioral or anything, would disrupt her teaching too much. So that was a great start point. When it came to math, we were starting to learn number lines. Basically, numbers were in a certain pattern on a line, like 10, 20, 30, 40-50- or 6, 8, 10, 12-14- etc. But a number was usually missing in the middle of the line, and we had to figure out the pattern and figure out what the missing number was. I remember this one was like 6, 9, 1, 2, 1, 8. Although it's simple now, it's counting by threes. The missing number would be 15. When I was 7 I didn't understand the pattern at all. So when the teacher called on me, I said I didn't know. She asked me how could I not know when she's explained it already. I clammed up, thinking I did something bad, and said I didn't know that either. She flipped out, strangely really mad over something so little, saying I was obviously not paying attention, and talking back when I said I truly didn't know, and sent me to the principal's office. The good news is the principal was amazing, and instead of me getting in trouble, he taught me math. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Oh fuck, I still think about this all the time. So back in 7th grade, I made a bet with this kid that he couldn't get this girl's number. He said alright, bet, and proceeded to get this girl's number. He walked back up with the number and told me I owed him $5 and that if I didn't have it tomorrow he was gonna jump me. Fast forward to the next day. I don't have this guy's money because I didn't take his threat seriously. After lunch, I walk into the bathroom where there are 3 guys waiting for me. 2 of them grabbed me. The third, who was the guy I owed money to, charged up for a moment and sent a kick from hell straight to my nutsack. They leave the bathroom, and I eventually make my way out sometime after. I turned the corner to go to class and ran into a girl who started asking me questions about what happened in the bathroom. I wasn't straightforward about it, but I guess she eventually figured out that something was up and told the principal. I don't know, but I was called up to the office before the end of the day. The principal sat me down and asked me about what happened in the bathroom, and I told them everything. He called my dad and told him he needed to come to the school. Once my dad arrived, the principal told us the other kids were suspended for the rest of the school year. Then he looked at me and said, "You know, according to the Bible, gambling is a sin. This whole thing wouldn't have happened had you not made that bet. I'm going to have to suspend you for 3 days." I'm a little late to this, but here's my story. My sophomore year I was in a pretty serious relationship with a girl in my band class. Unfortunately, we only got to see each other once a day, and to make things worse, her parents hated me. So, being the stupid kid that I was, I would try to see her as often as possible. One day during my geometry class we had a sub who liked to teach. However, she also let us do whatever we wanted, including leave to walk around the school. I was a pretty good kid, but I really wanted to surprise my girlfriend during lunch, and I knew this was my only chance that I could do it without consequences. So, I ask the teacher if I can leave. She says yes, and I'm off to the caf to see my girlfriend. I get to the cafeteria and surprise my girlfriend, but as I'm sitting there I notice the principal glaring at me. I had no idea if he knew I was skipping or what he was thinking. As it turns out, he was looking for a guy with the same name as me in the very same class I was in who just happened to follow my example and skip that day. Everyone in the class ratted on me and told the principal where I was. After eating lunch with my girlfriend I had planned on going to the bathroom to avoid the principal. Unfortunately, halfway to the bathroom my luck runs out, and the principal and the vice principal were on both ends of the hallway. I had no chances of escaping. They both take me in and tell me I'm getting 4 days of ice unless I join the football team. Then I'd only get half a day. So, I kindly agreed to come out to a practice to get out of detention. But here's the thing. I didn't come out to play, and they didn't give me more days. Win-win. TLDR, I suggested that the teacher can open a window. Since it was hot point I had a teacher that was really old and super right-wing Christian. All Muslims are terrorists, etc. And I used to get in power struggles with him a lot because he would say truly outrageous offensive things. So one day, it's quiet journaling time and it's super hot. Everyone in the class is complaining that we should open the door. I decide to stay out of this one because I had gotten in trouble the day prior for pointing out in his lecture that it's unfair to compare Muslims to Nazis. But he refuses to open the door because he knows we are just trying to get him to open the door so that we can get distracted by our friends outside. So, with a smug smile, he goes to this closet and pulls out the biggest fan I've ever seen and turns it on. He says, "See, now we don't have to open the door. Now sit quietly and do your work." The problem is that this fan is loud. Like it's more distracting than any of our friends outside for sure. Everyone tried to work at first, but then ended up just staring at the fan because the noise was ridiculous. The teacher notices that everyone is distracted by the fan, so he turns it off. Then I raise my hand and say, "Maybe you can open a window." So then he chews me out for 5 minutes in front of everyone, sends me to the dean of students, and tries to get me written up for defiance. The dean let me off after I told him what happened, but it was hands down the most ridiculous thing I've ever gotten in trouble for. Kinda late, but whatever. In 6th grade art class our teacher was super old and hard of hearing. So anyway, this kid named Tommy sitting beside me finished his work, but didn't really say anything to the teacher. So I tell him, if he's done he should hand it in. The teacher was right behind me, and apparently misheard me, and thought I was cursing at her. She sent me out into the hall for the rest of the 45 minutes left in the period. I didn't really care, honestly, but it still sucked. There was nothing to do. She didn't believe me when I said I was just telling Tommy to hand in his work. Different teacher this time, and honestly a good reason. So in homeroom we have to get our homework checked from the previous night. I, being a stupid 8th grader at the time, Didn't do it, so my teacher sends me out into the hall to complete it. I think, no biggie, that's fair. And it was, until it was time to come back in. When I went to open the door to get back in the classroom, my teacher walked up to me and said I wasn't allowed back in as I was the only one who hadn't completed my work. I just nodded and walked BSCK out, sent to the washroom, and got some a drink, and by the time I came back it was first period. I didn't hold it against her, and honestly laugh now. She was my favorite teacher at that school, and she got me into my favorite hobby, which is writing. So to Ms. Spence, if you're reading this, get some hearing aids at work. And to Mrs. Brewer, that's for allowing me to find my talent and hobby. In junior high gym class we had a big open shower area, about 10 shower heads on 3 walls of a rectangular room. One day we turned on hot water full blast on the showers by the entrance, so people had to go through a hot gauntlet to get to a shower they could use. Unfortunately this caused the water to leave shower area and flow into dressing room area. The dressing room was same tile as shower floor and had drains, so it was really a non-issue. The gym teacher thought otherwise. He yelled at us and said the next day everyone would shower one at a time, while he sat there with a clipboard grading how we showered. The next day only about 5 guys brought their gym clothes to class, so we could avoid the shower. The gym teacher was really pissed and made us stand on the bleachers with our hands behind our heads the whole class if we didn't dress. So about 25 guys were standing there like that when the principal walked in, showing around the superintendent who chose that day to visit. The superintendent questioned us about why we were being punished, and we said it was because we didn't dress for gym. No one mentioned the shower situation. A couple minutes later the principal comes back alone and takes us to his office for paddling. He carried a huge wooden paddle he wasn't shy about using. Because of the sheer number of us, he decided to just yell at us, then sent us back to the class. At the end of the class the gym teacher, true to his word, sat there and graded people one at a time on showering. In today's world I'm sure that would have gotten social media involved and outraged parents crying about sexual abuse of kids. The teacher did pull a dick move with the punishment, but he was a decent guy most of the time. TLDR, most of gym class punished because a floor got a tile floor made for hosing down got damp. First year gym teacher was explaining something to a high school gym class when he suddenly freezes, looks and points at me and says, "That's it, you're out here." Not only had I not said anything, but I hadn't heard anyone say anything, yet his tone and glare indicated that he thought I had said something wildly inappropriate. Suddenly put on the spot in front of my entire gym class of about 30 people, I, as patiently as I could, told him I hadn't said anything and asked him what I had done. This only seemed to anger him further, and he then shouted at me declaring that I knew what I had said and to get down to the office immediately. I looked around helplessly and saw nothing but confused looks from the rest of the class, who were clearly on my side. Rather than have the entire situation blow up, I decided to just be the bigger man and leave, which sucked because I loved gym class, and head to the office. Still to this day I have no idea what he thought I said. Bonus sense of justice. You know how every school seems to have that one cool veteran teacher who everybody knows, who knows everybody, and that everybody and loves and respects. Well, yeah, as I'm trying to hide my face outside the principal's office, he walks up, the last person I want to see me in that situation. He tells me he's surprised to see me there and asks what's up. When I gave him the quick rundown I could see him considering his thoughts and words, and then he leaned in and said, "If it was Mr. New Gym Teacher that said that, don't worry about it. I graduated not long after, and soon after that Mr. New Gym Teacher was gone as well." So in my 6th grade science class, we are all divvying up to get into groups for an assignment. After groups of kids split up into different sides of the class, I forgot my pencil at my desk in the center, so I walk over, grab my pencil. On my way back, instead of pushing the chair out of the way, I decided to step over it. Except I didn't step high enough. The bottom of my foot caught the chair and I fell over flat on my face. Entire class goes quiet. Everyone is looking at me after hearing loud thud. Teacher says to step out into the hall. I'm laughing and walking it off. When I'm out in the hall he tells me that little stunt you pulled there was endangering other students. I'm giving you a detention and you have to call your mom and tell her. At this point I was crying because this is the first time I have ever been in serious trouble. Tear rolling down my eyes, I call my mom, tell her what happened and why I was getting a detention. She verbally laughed and said, "You're joking, right?" She proceeded to give me an earful, then said to give the phone back to my teacher. She protested it as there is no reason to give anyone a detention for just falling over in class. It was an accident anyway. It's not like I threw myself on the ground and was attempting to hurt other people by smashing my face into the carpet. Still had to serve Wednesday detention. This is why I hate school administration in my area entirely. TLDR. I tripped when I tried to step over a chair, fell on my face, and got a detention for endangering other students. First grade. To preface, I was ultra shy as a kid. I barely uttered a word and never created a problem. Even my parents say I was a really well-behaved kid. In school I was quiet, but I had a few friends in my class like everyone else who I'd sit with during lunch. I was waiting outside the cafeteria in line. I was away from my class for some reason. Maybe I used the bathroom or maybe it was after an assembly, so I didn't know the kids I was standing by. I had that Badger Men song in my head because it was all over the radio at the time and was basically all I heard on the ride to school, and was patting my butt against the wall in rhythm of the Lame Pop song in my head. This teacher singled me out and put me in the back of the line, literally about 100 kids behind where I was, for having the rhythm of a song in my head. Hilariously, I was in the back with one of the kids I was friends with, and I complained a little, and she pulled me away and screamed at me louder and harder than I'd ever been screamed at up to that point. And my mother is faking Irish. I started crying, then got sent to the principal's office for being disrespectful or something. I still stand by it as my nephew is in the same school and she still teaches. That woman is a wicked bitch and shouldn't even be working with children if she has the capacity to be that mean. I had a cousin who had her class, and he stands by how mean of a woman she was too. It's those stupid childhood injustices that stick with you. So this Asian kid at my school was a total douche. Proof is that he is now a drug dealer with a ton of cars who goes to the gym every day. Well, basically, he got his sparks thrown out of the window by his mother because he was being a sheethead. It was a nice limited edition one. This was back in like 2012, not sure exactly when. So basically we are sitting in art and this guy makes fun of me all the time. I was a bit chubbier back then, and I have social issues with some situations. Anyway, after hearing enough of his bullshit, I say to him, "At least my parents don't throw my sparks out my window," to which he responds by punching me in the face. I sit there in shock as he suddenly starts crying and runs away. After a solid minute I put my head down and cry. It was a hard punch. Later I got in trouble for aggravation. I got put in a room called isolation for a whole day over this. TLDR. Brought up something I thought was casual. Punched in face. Worse punishment than detention. I have another one. There's this other kid in my school. Tall and heavily on drugs with a deadbeat dad. Usual sheet. He used to also bully me, so one day he waves at me whilst I pass him, and I stick my middle finger up at him, thinking nothing of it as he has done so much worse. Beating down my friend twice, violence against teachers, expulsion. But later I get called into the head of my year's office and I get given a talk about this and how I shouldn't do it. I know doing that isn't allowed, but this guy beat up my best friend. TLDR. Stuck my finger up at a future serial killer, and I got in major trouble whilst he was the victim. Reading a book. Basically, long sob story. Had no friends in school. At all. Whatever. Was a book nerd. Read a lot. But 8th and 9th grade cafeteria, there was a rule against having anything other than your lunch in it. You couldn't bring pencils or pens or paper or anything, let alone and God forbid an entire book. Apparently there wasn't enough space in the lunchroom for people to bring these things. Or something. Anyway, disregard, have no one to talk to, and generally finish lunch in 5 minutes, if I eat it at all. Bring book to read because honestly, lunchroom is really loud and makes it hard to focus. But oh well. Get in trouble for eating book at lunch and refusing to leave the book in the office for the entire rest of the school day. Get lunch detention. The premise of lunch detention? You get your lunch and get to sit in a quiet room by yourself and read a book while you eat lunch during lunch period. Which is literally all I ever wanted. But once they realized that I was happier in lunch detention than at actual lunch, they refused to keep giving it to me and instead started putting me in after school detention until I finally stopped bringing a book to lunch. Bonus points. They called my mom because I got in trouble for reading a book at lunch. My mom, who is a librarian, who loves books, who was very confused and is still, in fact, very confused as to why one would get in trouble for reading a book at school. Edit. Also writing that I wanted to die on an assignment in 2nd or 3rd, I forget which, grade. Did genuinely want to die. Got yelled at by multiple people. No one ever bothered to ask what was wrong. Was only told it was not okay to say that. What I learned that day was that it is not okay to let adults know you are not okay. Still want to die. Still don't tell authority figures about these things. Both happened in grade 10. I was suspended for a day for wearing a bandana. We had a no bandanas rule because of gang affiliation, but I was in art class and had to draw a self-portrait, so held my hair out of my face with a bandana. Oh, and I should mention I lived in a country town with less than 5,000 people in it, so there were no gangs. My English teacher was not my biggest fan. Now one day my friend forgot his textbook, so I moved a couple seats over to share mine with him. This made her quite upset, so she demanded I moved back to my seat. Now since I had taken 3/4 of a semester of her sheet, I responded to her anger with, "Are you really going to deprive this kid of his education just because you don't like me?" To which she kicked me out. Not just for the day, for the rest of the semester. We still had the entire Shakespeare unit to learn. Luckily for me, I had been in the play Romeo and Juliet at least twice, so had a very good understanding of the plot and characters. So anyways, I spent the next 3 weeks sitting by myself in the library doing dick all, and then had to write the final exam/essay. I showed up to her class the day of the exam and was told I have to write my exam in the office. I managed an 84% final grade, even after being docked from all the missed work. See what a scourge is laid upon your hate, beach. For the next 2 years I wasn't even allowed to use the library when she was on duty. She really didn't like me. Also worth mentioning, the VP hated my guts and laughed in my face when I told her I wanted to do better in school. Like actually laughed at me while I was sitting right in front of her. I graduated with honors and won 3 awards. Our high school, you are definitely not missed. This one is for me. I wrote a fake PWL password list cracker. Had it on home drive. It didn't do anything apart from making the HDD do stuff and randomness to make it look like it was actually doing stuff. Anyway, around the same time I had a suspicion that admins were monitoring me, specifically remote screen viewing, whenever I was on the computers at lunch. So I opened up Notepad and typed "fuck you admins" apostrophe CTRL plus C CTRL plus V V V V V V V. I thought nothing of the message. It wasn't saved. They wouldn't admit before that they were watching. So if they were, they would be admitting it. They were. I was taken to in-school suspension. They wouldn't tell me what I actually did, but they made me sit in a room and write a 1,000-word essay on what I did wrong. I told them the fake PWL cracker. They came back and told me no, that wasn't what I did. I was confused. What did I do wrong then? Apparently the screen capturing monitoring that they didn't do. They do. Second day in suspension, while I had to write a second essay on why I was wrong. At least I was the first one to build a T83 and LT serial cable there and get a ton of games on the calc, including some of my own, and started an epidemic of people playing games on their calculators. I got banned from computers each year from Y9-12 through 2 different schools. Record was 4 days into the school year. Now I'm a electronic engineer / systems engineer / software engineer with no formal qualifications. Senior year of high school, I realized I was lactose intolerant. Before I came to the realization, however, I would have to leave class occasionally to go to the nurse's office to go number 2. I didn't know why I would urgently and suddenly have to go, and it was really embarrassing, especially because the school's bathroom policy was 5 minutes. I would have to leave for up to 20 minutes on any given day to go have some unpleasant time with ridiculously thin toilet paper, and other students would easily notice how long I had been missing. One day I quietly told my psychology teacher that I had to use the bathroom and that it would probably exceed the 5-minute limit. She politely told me it was no problem and to quietly sign out name and time on the whiteboard at the front of the room. After relieving myself and quietly slipping back into the classroom, eager to erase the time I had left, my teacher completely stopped class to ask me, "Did you pop your pants?" Shocked, I mumbled, "What?" She responded, "Do you need a diaper or something?" I was really taken aback. My girlfriend and other friends were in that class and she publicly embarrassed me further by putting my name on the board under the brand new title Grounded. I wasn't allowed to use the bathroom for the rest of the year. I ended up getting a doctor's note just to be able to use the bathroom. I don't generally hate people, but that teacher may just be my exception. She was the teacher that would gossip with students and look at their social media and bully people her student friends didn't like. Nasty woman. High school, grade 9 I believe. My buddy and I had weight training together and decided to walk into the weight room with our shorts hiked up quite high with our shirts tucked in. The reception was pretty great. Many of the other kids in the class did the same thing off and on throughout the period during exercise demonstrations. Well, apparently the teacher didn't think it was very funny, so he reported my buddy and I to the principal at the end of the period for indecent exposure and told him that we were just basically whipping out our doozers and swinging them around. Of course this was not the case, but we both got suspended for 3 days because of it. Another time, I was suspended for not having completely black shoes. I went to a high school that had a uniform. People were suspended and sent to the office so often for uniform infractions. My shoes were 99% black outside of a tiny white accent near the toe. I was told I wasn't allowed back into the school until I wore proper shoes or used a permanent marker to color it in. Not coming from a very wealthy household, considering these shoes were pretty expensive, I refused. My shirt was always tucked in. I always looked presentable. I was a fairly stylish guy, so I liked to look my best wherever I was, but I was suspended until further notice. As far as I remember, I spent a day or two at home and just came into school hoping it would cool off. It worked for a little while, but eventually the principal noticed them again a few months later and basically forced me to Sharpie my only pair of shoes. I swear, that administration spent more time hammering down on dress code than it did anything else. Meanwhile, friends of the principal's sons who went to the school the same time I did were allowed to waltz around the hallways looking like they were wearing school branded bedsheets with Nikes on scot-free. Bullshit. I'm from the south and years back, when I was in junior high we were able to buy these school packages. Glue, scissors, pencils, paper, you name it, it was in there. It even included a damn tissue box. Well, my school had a policy that the tissue box would be donated to the homeroom teacher, because what the hell is a junior high kid gonna do with a whole huge box of tissues? I didn't really like the policy because hell, I paid for them, so I should get to keep them. Timmy doesn't need to grab 10 of the tissues I paid for, so he can whip up his spilled orange juice. But whatever, it's just a box of tissues. Anyway, I had a habit of getting seasonal allergies because nature, so I always carried around my own supply of tissues. One day in homeroom I grab a tissue out of my box in my backpack when I notice the devil at the front of the room staring at me. Sen_me_tigs_ please. Would you like to explain why you are stealing the class's tissues? I looked at her in utter confusion and disbelief. Was she accusing me of stealing her tissues? I calmly respond to her, no, they are mine. Apparently she didn't take this too well because she stomped towards me and dragged me into the hall by my ears. There she promptly notified the principal of my mischief, and even after protesting and explaining the situation, I was still given a week's worth of after-school detention. This was over 15 years ago, and I'm still livid about it. They weren't even the same damn brand as the ones that came with the school package. And fact, even if I did steal them, I paid for them at the beginning of the year. TLDR, used a tissue from my backpack, was accused of stealing. Got a week's worth of after-school detention. I'm both delighted and infuriated by reading these. As an art/English language learners teacher, not official classes as of yet, as I'm still in school, I volunteer for practice. This firms my resolve to be the cool teacher that shares my love of art, but has worthwhile expectations for my students, to not only encourage their creativity, but help them in the real world. Especially since I've suffered at the hands of unworthy teachers who would have been weeded out if teachers' education was like it is today. For example, kindergarten. I was a sweet, mostly innocent girl who loved to draw and color, and according to my teacher, the beloved Mrs. Treg, shameless plug because I heard she's doing a local PBS type show with her husband now, even told my mother that I was doing art at a 2nd grade level. But I wore glasses, and glasses were not cool in the late 90s/early 2000s, so I was teased and bullied relentlessly. My first detention came at the hands of the other kindergarten teacher. Because, in our Midwestern winters, we had the understandable rule that you were not allowed to be on the ice. I complied, especially since my mother encouraged this rule, after falling on the poorly salted ice outside of my classroom. Alas, me being a two-eyed freak would have to be dealt with by the other class. Two of my bullies found me one winter recess and pushed me down and onto the ice. I was crying. My gloves got pushed up, and I was scraped. My butt hurt from the fall, and they were laughing and calling me mean names. And what does that cunt do? Come over and tell her students not to bully the little girl and push me around. Send me inside, so I can go to the nurse. Oh no. Because I was on the ice / heaven forbid. That first detention started a downhill slide. I liked detention. I got to sit inside and read where it was warm and not deal with meanie faces holes. In about 2nd, 3rd grade, things got much worse. My 3rd grade teacher used to be a 2nd grade teacher the year before, therefore had some students for a 2nd year. Of course she played favorites. The bullies never stopped. And now my bullies included the new principal, whom I often refer to as Muggle Umbridge. You see, my mother had nearly 4 years prior made the wise decision to divorce my father for lying to her nearly the entire courtship, cheating on her with a cheap crack hoe, and generally being a drunken asshole who would abuse us both. But this created a problem in the eyes of Muggle Umbridge. I had a single mother, and single mothers are scum who absolutely bring in a string of men in their child's life to fund their sinful habits. Or so she thought. I also had undiagnosed ADHD and even PTSD from the horrors I had faced at the hands of my father, stepmother, and her awful kids. On top of being a gifted reader and otherwise advanced student. This is American public school. Mind, the bar isn't quite as high as I would have liked. Then came one day where I was arguing with my teacher and talking back or something. Probably defending why I spelled color and favorite with a U on a spelling test. Because I read internationally published books that didn't bother to change it for the American audience, and damn right I was going to show her my copy of whatever Harry Potter book I was on at the time, to show her I was right. In comes Muggle Umbridge, just looking for an excuse to get this vile heathen out of her school and into foster care with a proper nuclear family. Now, I don't remember exactly what happened, but she somehow triggered my PTSD. Veterans' experiences in movies can give you an idea of what I was experiencing at the time. She dragged me, kicking and screaming, to her office. After the threats of having me taken away from my beloved mother and all other infractions against my well-being, my mother decides to transfer me to a private school where, besides not learning about dinosaurs and being behind on multiplication, life got significantly better. Until 6th grade, I was put back into public school, away from my friends, who were in another district. But the school was 3 blocks away. In the meantime, I had been raised a legend. I had gone down in LWE history as the girl that kicked Muggle Umbridge, who had shown her beachy self, and had tried to get the Tregs fired for bullshit reasons. Apparently I didn't live up to their expectations. Just a skinny kid in glasses that was quiet, shy, but was fascinated with the timpanis, or kettle drums. This led to other issues. I had proven myself worthy to experiment with these drums under band teacher supervision, while the other percussionists had not. This infuriated them even more. They were in an out of school drum line, while I was just in an out of school choir. Why the hell would I be good enough? They got their revenge. making me go back to the bad place I was, telling my only friend that I was a lesbian. Jokes on them. I'm being made out with a super pretty senior as a freshman and turning her against me and generally making me hate the drums. Middle school was a general, preppy rich kid filled hell for me. At least I have the validating moment in 8th grade where the whole supervising teacher essentially stepping back into his room at just the right time to allow me a chance at payback with the girls who had made my life hell for 3 years. I even got ice for breaking up a fight between 2 of my friends. It was just about to turn into a physical fight when I had stepped in and calmed them down. Why? Zero tolerance policy? Of course. But also because what I should have done was tell our teacher, who was supposed to retire that year because she was so old and was on an errand in the library, which was on the other side of the school. High school didn't change much. I got called into the principal's office for allegedly telling an ex-friend that I wanted her dead. Got out of that one by explaining it was a misunderstanding. I told her not to hang around a known manho and senior as a freshman with a boyfriend, as her boyfriend would surely break up with her and earn her the reputation of a cheating hussy. She didn't listen. He broke up with her after seeing photographic evidence of her on the manho's lap. I told her so and told her I didn't want to be friends with someone who didn't heed my advice, then blame me for it. Even saying that I'll be dead before I'm friends with you again. In true 14-year-old girl fashion. Then a school change when my mother got a new job and a fresh can of hell. Right back to bullies actually getting away with bullying me in class because our football team is important. They sucked and we can't possibly take out our precious football players for teasing the new girl. But I graduated and now I'm training to be a teacher so I can maybe, just maybe, be a ray of hope for my future students and the one teacher that actually gives a fuck and remembers what it's like to be a kid. So apologies for the wall of text. I try to write this stuff down when I can so I won't forget. Thankfully, most of my current students are adults and probably couldn't tell you what Reddit is. In grade 9 I had a tyrant of a French teacher. We had to wear dress shoes as part of our uniforms and the laces in mine never seemed to stay tied. I came into class one day and my laces were untied. Instead of just asking me to tie my laces, this teacher told me I was out of uniform and told me to wait in the hall for her. She proceeded to beach me out about lack of respect for the school and the uniform or some batshit insane stuff. This is the part of the story where I become an asshole teenager. The next day I came in with my shoelaces tied around my biceps. I got thrown out of class and beached it in the halls again. The next day I left my laces in my locker just for her class. That way they weren't untied. This time I got sent to the principal's office. Principal was cool. He told me this teacher was high-strung read, psycho beach, and asked me to stop screwing with her. I explained how it started, and he kind of smirked, because he knew this whole thing was her fault. You can't act like that towards a teenager and expect them not to retaliate in some way. The next day I came in with nice loafers, no shoelaces even possible, that were considered dress shoes. This was actually my mom's idea, because she is an evil genius, and because as a teacher herself thought this teacher was crazy and needed to learn to pick her battles with teenagers. The teacher was all smug about sending me to the principal's office the next day when I came in. When she saw the loafers, the look on her face was priceless. She couldn't do shit and she knew she had lost a battle of will with a 14-year-old. The look can only be described as faked by Ron Jeremy without any lube, and I had the biggest, most smug smirk on my face as I politely greeted her that morning and was told to take my seat. I dropped my French after grade 9. Also had another teacher in grade 12 pronounce the word schism as sheism. I very politely corrected her pronunciation of the word, but she lost her sheet. Got sent to the principal's office and found out from friends she called down to the office to tell them I had been disrespectful and that she made something up about being close to tears. I got down to the principal's office and they just told me to go back to class. This teacher was known for not being able to handle being corrected. It also helped that I was one of the good kids that really didn't cause any problems and that my average grade was north of 98%. All of the staff liked me because I was polite and spent most of the time after the teacher was done their lesson helping other kids in the class, and I spent well over 100 hours during my senior year tutoring other kids in My class is for free. So to start the story off, I essentially was an accomplice to breaking a computer monitor in my high school computer lab. In my high school computer class we sat in a weird formation where the computers were arranged and people sitting at them would have someone directly behind them. One day this kid was being a retard and decided to push himself away from his computer with so much force that it hit me who was directly behind him, and I bumped into the desk and the monitor fell off and broke. The teacher knew it wasn't my fault, so he brought the other kid down to the principal's office where he proceeded to blame me for the monitor breaking, and I ended up receiving the punishment instead of him. Now this is where revenge was sought. I recently was at my local pub having a few to drink where I see the same guy who got me in trouble for that computer monitor. He was a bit drunk and was making a scene. One thing led to another, and he gets into a fight with a larger gentleman at the bar. Police show up at the end and me being nosy I went outside. A friend of mine who works in my town's police department was one of the officers who came to the bar for the complaint. I walk over to him and tell him I saw the whole thing and that he instigated the fight and was primarily his fault. Without hesitation they bring him in and lock him up overnight with a few minor charges. Revenge is a beach. Glad that sheet went full circle. TLDR. Some kid in high school blamed me for breaking something I didn't, and I got in trouble. Recently I was a helping hand in him spending a night in jail. I have a couple. I only remember these because of how great I felt the injustice was. I also have a tendency to laugh or smile when I know I'm innocent or feel I haven't done anything wrong, which likely only hurts my case. The teachers from K4 were all as whole nuns, by the way. Anyway, kindergarten, my friend asks me for a pencil. I hand it to him while leaning over and not really looking. At that same moment, a girl was walking by and my hand grazed the bottom of her skirt between her legs. No skin contact, completely accidentally, happened in like 2 seconds. She tells the teacher I touched her in an inappropriate area. Get sent with a note home. Kindergarten, playing some game where you clap your hands against the other person's. Miss Mary Mac or something like that. Obviously when you play this game, your elbows move backward. Kid is walking behind me and one of my elbows hits him. Tells teacher I hit him. Get sent to corner and no recess. 3rd grade in a bathroom and I drop my library card. Friend pees on it. I pick it up by the one corner that is dry and bring it back and tell teacher he peed on it. Teacher thinks I'm lying, trying to get him in trouble, and gets sent to corner. 3rd grade, I'm in the bathroom, taking a sheet in a closed stall. A group of like 1st graders comes in cause it's their scheduled time to go to the bathroom. Catholic school. A few of them peek into the stall for whatever reason. I tell them to stop and they don't. So I tell them to stop pretty loudly. When I leave the bathroom, a teacher is waiting for me and starts yelling at me about what is wrong with me. I explain what happened, but I guess she does not care. Don't recall punishment. 3rd grade. I have very bad springtime allergies. I'm uncontrollably sneezing in class and teacher thinks I'm faking it. Get sent to principal's office. 4th grade, have to do a reading assignment on a computer. Do it. Teacher doesn't believe I could have finished it. Tell her I did. She doesn't believe me. Starts shouting at me. Maintain I did it. Get in trouble for lying and disrespecting the teacher. No recess or something like that. 4th grade, I'm at the school mass at church and I'm basically supervising a kindergartner. The instructions were to help keep them quiet and if they kick their legs tell them to stop and gently push their legs back. Apparently my kid is a troublemaker and he starts kicking non-stop no matter what I say or do. Get in trouble for inciting him. I forget punishment. 4th grade, I'm asking the teacher about questions about mummies. We are talking back and forth, but apparently, and I think what follows happened, because she got tired of me asking questions. At some point during our discussion she decided that I needed to have raised my hand. Tells me to be quiet and stop calling out. Sends me out of the room and into the hallway. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. Getting talked to multiple times by a few teachers for finishing tests in class. Walked too quickly, for rushing through them to show off. I wasn't rushing, I just found the material very easy. I mean I would finish most tests and assignments within 10 minutes and the next person to finish took like 20 more. It wasn't for doing poorly on these tests, I always excelled. Even had a meeting with my parents about the principal telling me to not rush, because then I would just sit there the rest of the class period distracted doing nothing. Ridiculous. I do the work, but I do it too well, too quickly. 5th grade, 2 kids took my hat, and I was trying to get it back. They were throwing it between themselves. Teacher sees, and, for some reason, keeps me in the principal's office for like 15 minutes. 7th grade, there's a box of food with random snacks and candy in it on a table. I lean over and look inside it to see the variety. Then the middle school director comes over and shouts, "What you just did is incredibly rude and disrespectful." Turns out there was some document she wrote next to the box that apparently had something personal on it. I didn't even notice or care about it, but she doesn't believe me, and I get no lunch break for like 3 days. 7th grade, we have a meeting about how you have to be nice to each other, and whatever. Right after, this whole kid starts insulting/annoying me, and whatever, being the regular asshole he is. But he's still kind of my friend. I was getting really pissed, so I decided to say the meanest possible stuff I could say to him, something that would really hurt his feelings. He starts crying at the lunch table. Teacher gets sent over, investigates. We get sent to the principal's office. I get out of school suspension for basically making fun of a kid. He gets nothing. Had stage band first period senior year high school. Ended up only me and one other band member could get that time for the class. Just he and I there, and the band instructor would leave after he saw us standing around. My friend and I had a coffee maker set up, and we drank coffee all class, and we'd sneak around the building to smoke. Well, on this day before school he brought a big Ziploc bag full of sugar to sweeten our coffee, and we were out back smoking cigarettes with the band instructor's son. My friend was showing us the big bag of sugar and bragging that we'd never run out of sugar again when the vending machine guy drove by. No big deal, he'd gone by before on other days. It was close to the first bell. We are smoking and out jumps the assistant principal. He is being cute and says, "Gentlemen, what are you doing?" Of course we all say, "Smoking a cigarette." "What's it look like to you?" So off to the office we go. He sits us down and asks us if there is anything we have to say. We say no, just smoking. He leaves the room. We all look at each other and we know something is up. Usually it only took 15 minutes to be suspended. We were experts. The principal comes back and looks at my friend and says, "Do you have a large bag with white powder in it?" He pulls out the bag and says, "The sugar." We all had an epiphany at the same time. We were being accused of distributing cocaine at school. The principal opened the bag and sniffed it, and then licked his finger and dipped it in the white powder and stuck it in his mouth, like he knew what cocaine tasted like. This was the 70s. Sure enough, it was sugar. So he suspended us for smoking on campus. TLDR, vending machine guy drives by, sees bag of white powder and rats us out for dealing cocaine. I came up with the idea to put hairspray in an Easter egg with one of those poppets that snap when they hit the ground, with the idea that it would pop open with a bang when it hit the ground. I was in 6th grade. I drew this idea on a piece of paper, and when the teacher asked I explained it as a bomb. Yes, stupid, I know, but I was a 6th grader and didn't even know about Columbine. This comes in later. So he sends me to the assistant principal, who then interrogates me for like half an hour regarding my motives. He asked me where I got the idea, and I told him the truth. I made a potato cannon with my church youth group and thought it was cool. I had no idea what I did wrong, and he kept yelling at me. Even after I started crying, he asked me if I knew what Columbine was, to which I said no. So of course he explained to a scared crying 6th grader how some guys rolled into school with guns and killed their classmates. Like, why did he tell me that? Why was that helpful to tell me? But anyway, after giving me the "I could call the police, they could take you to jail" line, he eventually gives me a 90-minute detention, half of which was to be served in his office for drawing an Easter egg with hairspray in it. I never threatened anyone. I never thought of threatening anyone, and I was clearly scared and confused. Point the kicker. That just shows the mindset of this guy was when he called my mom. My mom, of course, was furious with him, but kept her composure on the phone. She tried to explain to him that I was just a quiet kid, to which he said, "I kid you not, it's always the quiet ones. I'm Still super salty about the whole thing. Made me scared of adults and school administration for the rest of my public school career. I told the gist of my story in a comment reply, but from this thread and others like it, I have come up with a scale of unfair school punishments. Here it is from worst to less worse. Something someone else did to you. Something you had nothing to do with. You did something, but nothing wrong, or against the rules. You did the thing, but it was an accident, or for a legitimate reason. In other words, it's not your fault / shouldn't be punished. I've experienced 1 and 2. Year 1, someone made a mess, then asked me to help them pick it up, so I was being nice and helped them. Then they called the teacher over and said I made the mess and was forcing them to pick it up. I got time out. After a while, the teacher came and asked if I had learned a lesson. I said no, because I didn't do anything wrong, so then I had to stay in timeout longer. I'm not still mad about this or anything, but this thread brought it back to mind. Year 7, someone tried to frame me for graffiti in the bathroom. This time the teachers believed me, and I didn't get punished, but it's worth mentioning, because they did call my mom, and were initiating, and suspension and stuff. I wrote the grades the British way because why not? An example of 3 would be the guy on this thread who kicked an apple. An example of 4 would be the guy on this thread who was late for school for calling someone an ambulance but still got detention, or the kid who accidentally kicked a pebble at the teacher while on the swings. The guy on an older thread drawing with chlorophyll would be somewhere between a 3 and 4. Not really wrong on accident, but didn't deserve punishment. I went to a private high school, and they of course had some dumb dress code rules. One of which was that hair wasn't allowed to touch your collar or cover your ears at all. I wanted dreadlocks and didn't think it would be a problem since there were plenty of guys in my class who had them. I was very wrong. Turns out that if you're white and want dreadlocks, it's frowned upon. Me, but if you're black, the other kids in my class, you can do whatever you want with your hair. Anyway, I grew out my hair, but held it up with a hairband for most of my senior year. The last day of school comes around, and I had just finished my last final. On my way to my car, I took out the hairband, thinking hell yes, finally out of this place. But just happened to be passing the principal on the sidewalk. As she passed me, she said something along the lines of better get a haircut, assuming that I would obey her authority without question. I responded with a "we'll see," which I thought was a more polite way of saying no. She ends up saying that she won't let me walk at graduation if I don't cut it. My mom gets a call later explaining the situation. She laughs at the principal, tells her that I won't be cutting my hair, and that we'll see her at graduation. Graduation comes around, and I have like 35 bobby pins and a shit ton of gel in my hair to make it hide under the graduation cap. When the principal called my name, I gave the look like fuck you. I didn't get a haircut and take the diploma. Never been more proud of my mom in my life. TLDR. I got detention for making fun of a girl's missing eyebrows. Sorry if I misspell anything or use a punctuation incorrectly. I'm a very shitty writer, but I wanted to tell my story. In middle there was this girl named Jules, not her real name, and she didn't have any eyebrows. Nobody knew if she shaved them off or if she was born without them, but even though they were missing she never drew them on, so it was a bit weird and sort of unsettling. In English we get an assignment to write an essay, and for some reason Jules decides to come to my desk and judge my handwriting. Out of nowhere she raises her voice and tells the whole class how I've got jelly handwriting. For some reason everything thought it was funny, and they all began to laugh. Now I may be the quiet type of guy, but I wasn't going to let her make fun of me, so out of pure anger I yelled, "At least I have my eyebrows." The whole room got dead quiet, and she ran out of the room crying. After a few minutes passed, my teacher gets a call to send me down to the SPC, Student Planning Center, which is pretty much the place where all the mischievous kids go to when they either get suspended or get detention. When I finally got to the SPC, the secretary told me to apologize to Jules for the hurtful comment or I would get suspended for the rest of the day. I ended up apologizing to her, but I still got detention for 2 days. To this day, I have yet to know why her eyebrows were missing and why my comment made her cry so much. First day of 2nd grade, and I got a teacher no for screaming and being really nasty. My father had the same teacher when he was young, and she would make him sit on a stool in the corner facing the wall because he wouldn't say the Pledge of Allegiance. She already didn't like me when she saw I refused to do the same, but she now could do nothing about it. So she asks us to go pick up the 2 dittos by the window. Having only had 2 teachers before that year, my vocab so far as to teacher used terms was limited. I had no idea what a ditto was. I walked over by the window and looked around trying to figure it out. Then I walked up to her and asked what it was. She screamed in my face so loud and long about how ignorant I was that I couldn't stop myself from getting upset. I didn't make another sound for the rest of the day. When I told my parents, my dad did this short laugh and started shaking his head. Then he told me about his experience with. After that, every single parent-teacher conference my dad made sure to be there with my mom. Even though he worked a very labor-intensive job 40 plus a week. I ran into her years later when I was in my 20s, and even though it had been years, I still wanted to tell her how terrible she was and how terrible she made me feel that whole year. I didn't though, I just said hi and went on my way. Added fun little fact, when I was getting my son set up for kindergarten at a school in the same district, the secretary said she still comes in and volunteers at the grade school I had gone to every day. I was taking geology my senior year of high school for an easy A credit. The regular teacher had retired, so my high school just stuck an old as dirt tenured science teacher to teach the class. I don't think geology was his specialty, and he had no control of the classroom, which ended up becoming a class where the delinquent students were shoved because no one gave a sheet. Every student was sat to a long table. The person sitting next to me was a nice, quiet girl that I had become friends with. So like every other day, the teacher tries to teach for 5 minutes, ends up giving up a ridiculous simple worksheet, and gives up trying to teach the class anything else. My neighbor and I finish the worksheet in 5 minutes and then have a quiet conversation. The rest of the class was whooping and acting crazy. I remember one guy standing on a chair trying to take off his hoodie. The teacher isn't even trying to attempt to any discipline. Instead, he comes around to my table and asks me why I'm not working on the worksheet. I give it to him and say I'm already done, and it was left at that point. Later in the evening, when I go home, my parents get a phone call from the teacher. He is now claiming that I was being disruptive in class. My dad hears about this and flips out on me. I hadn't gotten in trouble for being disruptive since the 1st grade. I used to be real chatty in class, but I had grown out of, or at least learned how to act in class. I should also mention that my dad never flips out on me, so I was pissed off that this idiot teacher tried to sell me down the river when he couldn't even control the rest of the class, and I didn't even do anything. And pissed at my dad for taking his word over mine. I ended up yelling back at my dad that if he wants, he's more than welcome to sit with me in my classroom and see how everyone else behaved. I was livid. 13 years later, I still hate that worthless teacher. I got punished at school for asking too many questions. I was in 5th grade. I'm a very detail-oriented person, so naturally I notice little mistakes that, in my mind, require questions for clarification. Eventually, my teacher told me I was asking too many questions and that I should think for myself. She gave me 4 popsicle sticks with question marks on them, and I had to turn one in each time I asked her a question during silent work time. This was just sad. To know that there is a question in a question, you have to know enough about the topic. By that logic, I was smarter than the teacher because I was the one who was asking questions. She didn't even realize that there was a question to be asked. She was such a bitch. I'm glad she left the school. This isn't something I got punished for, but it is bullshit zero tolerance policy, so I'll relate in any way. I think most people will get a laugh out of the stupidity of people in this situation. I have a friend at school, Kellen. He disappeared from school on about 4/17. I wasn't really concerned at first. He got sick a surprising amount. My guess is that it has to do with his consistent late night gaming sessions. Anyway, I wasn't concerned. That is, until I heard the full story. Kellen is really the only important name in here. Other names are true, but they are not worth explaining. Kellen was talking about masturbation outside somewhere with someone. Cooper overheard the conversation. Cooper told Colin, and Colin told the principal. The principal called the cops. He was taken to the police station. He was suspended for the rest of the school year, about 2 weeks. Kellen has been sued. Kellen also has 3 options: be labeled as a sex offender, take a few months of sex education/counseling, or spend 6 months in juvie. In the last 2 he could still be labeled as a sex offender. At my school, if you do not pass 2/3 or more classes, you are held back and forced to repeat the grade. The bad thing is, Kellen missed finals. He'll be getting a 0 on all of them. If he doesn't pass enough classes, he'll be held back. And I really like him. He's got a dirty and dark mind, and me, him, and my friend group were working on plans for world domination. Also, my principal is the biggest Christian homophobic transphobic atheophobe. And he supports Trump. If he gets held back, I don't know what I'll do. He's been my close friend since 4th grade, and I'm currently in 7th. Also, there's a rumor circulating at my school that Kellen was caught actually masturbating. Come on beaches, no one is that faking stupid. Also, even if he doesn't get held back, I fear that I may not be able to be friends with him anymore. If he's been through that kind of stuff, he's likely going to not be allowed to have friends of the opposite gender. Plus, everyone else is going to be disgusted by him, so he's going to become more of a loner than before.